Recording in progress.
Good morning, members of the Portfolio Committee on Basic Education, Dr. Mahule, the Deputy Minister, and the team from DBE. It's 9:30. If you just allow 2 more minutes for Chairperson to log in, if you would allow. Thank you very much. Good morning, members of the Portfolio Committee once again, and Deputy Minister and the team from DBE. The chairperson is still trying to log in. She's having some difficulty. I would want to, for the sake of time, if you would allow, that we maybe elect an acting chair just for the period until chairperson is able to log in with us. If that is fine with members.
Yep, Mr. Brown, I think that's fine. I would like to raise the name of Honorable Law.
Thank you, Honorable Mkhize. Honorable Mkhize has nominated Honorable Low as acting chair. Could I have a seconder for that? Honorable Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. I'd like to nominate Honorable Spies.
Honorable Jordan is Can I first get a seconder for the nomination of Honorable Low, please? Members, a seconder for Honorable Low. Honorable Governor.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. My name is Yanga Kovana, member of the Portfolio Committee. I second the name of Honorable Law.
Thank you, Honorable Governor. Now we'll move to the nomination of Honorable Jordan for Honorable Spies as acting chairperson. Could I get a seconder for that nomination? Any seconder for Honorable Spies as nominated by Honorable Jordan? Going once. Going twice. In the absence of a seconder for the nomination by Honorable Jordan for Honorable Spies as acting chairperson, I'm going to have to move back to Honorable Low as acting chairperson for the session until chairperson has arrived, if that is all in order. Thank you very much. Honorable Low.
Thank you very much, Mr. Brown. Good morning, colleagues. Good morning, Minister. Mr. Brown, please flight the agenda so that we proceed, as we already lost a few minutes. You are all welcome to the Portfolio Committee. As we know that today, we're expected to... I will not put on my video because of my network. I'm in my deep rural areas in where I will not be able to interact properly, but I apologize for that as I am having a program. Our agenda today, we are going to discuss, get a formal presentation by the Department of Basic Education on the Children's Amendment Bill. And then we're also going to getting the briefing on DBE on schools for learners with special education needs, challenges that are mitigated. And then we will have members to engage, get clarity if they agree with the presentation and align, and therefore get to deal with critical issues. So, Mr. Brown, I'm not sure, let's deal with the roll call and apologies firstly. Who's here in the meeting, and so that we are able to check. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable. Thank you, Acting Chairperson. I will just do the roll call. It's Honorable Govana, or yourself, Honorable Low. I have Honorable Jordan, Honorable Spies, Honorable Mkhize, and Honorable Magagula. I have apologies for now. I see the DG is on the platform, Honorable Low, but I have received an apology for him because he's currently in transit.
Good morning.
Honorable Tabanchaba.
I'm there.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Chairperson, Acting Chair, so Honorable DG Muele has put in an apology as he is in transit. Dr. Whittle was to lead the delegation. I do believe that he has to now be at the MTEF Technical Committee briefing. And I believe, unless I may be wrong, Ms. Gayer will then take over. I do also see Deputy Minister Mahule on the platform. One other apology I have is for our content advisor, Ms. Portia Mbude Mutsikwane, who unfortunately will have to leave us at around 10:30, as she is also doing duties at the Women's Parliament this morning. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Brown. It means that we quite confirmed. The DG will therefore confirm if it's in a meeting. We welcome the Minister, the DM, and we welcome members as we have said. So we will, can we fly the agenda again? As I highlighted that, honourable members, today's agenda brings before us two matters that goes to our heart of the committee's constitutional mandate, where the right of every child in this country, regardless of where they are born or how poor their community is, to access education that is safe, adequate, and equal in substance, not merely in the name. First, we will engage in a department on a Children's Amendment Bill, and specifically the provisions establishing a single registration system for early child development programs. I think it's quite important to state plainly that on behalf of this committee, we should welcome the principle underlying this reform. For too long, the ECD programs operating out of shacks, containers, church halls, and community spaces, and the lived realities of early learning provision in this country have been measured against the standards designed for well-resourced urban centers and excluded as a result. So nearly half of this country's roughly 42,000 early learning programs saving some 1.6 million children, have set outside the regulatory system entirely, which is amplified enabling pathway into the system that is overdue, and the committee should support the intention. Honour members, our support for the principle does not relieve us of our duty to interrogate the detail, but the bill makes government funding of registered ECD programs a discretionary rather than a mandatory. In our country, rated amongst the most unequal in the world, that is not a small drafting choice. It is a policy decision with a direct consequence for whether registration becomes a genuine gateway to support our simply a more efficient way of documenting need without a meeting. So members, as indicated, we'll have pressing the departments precisely this point today. And I want to signal from the chair that this committee expect clear substantive answers, not assurances in principle, but specific on how to discretionary funding will translate into guaranteed access to subsidies, infrastructure, nutrition compliance, support for centers in poor and rural communities. We're not here to obstruct this bill. We're here to ensure it delivers what it promises. And second, we turn to the department's update report on the inclusive education, where the committee has previously engaged the department on the slow pace of transformation that has been envisaged under Education White Paper 6. And today's report will require us to test whether the growth reported in the special and full services schools, assertive technology, and the NCS accommodations reflects the genuine progress toward an inclusive system or continued reliance on parallel structures that Article 24 of the CRPD cautions against. Members will recall that the ministerial task team own findings pointed to implement the remains under-resourced and uneven. We'll want the full report behind those findings, not only summarized observations. And I want to remind all members that our role in this committee is oversight in the fullest sense to acknowledge the genuine progress where the department demonstrated and to hold line firmly where intentions delivery diverge. Both items on today's agenda sit exactly as an intersection. So, having to say that, you are all welcomed to the meeting, and I thought that I should lay the foundation and outline the key critical things in reminding our members and reminding the department as to where we are and what is the expectation that we want to attain. And we'll welcome the bill, but we'll remind you on the imperatives that are going to put in alignment what we'd want to have as outcomes that are quite attainable and outcomes that are realistic and that are quite responsive in the issue, in the realities that continues to face our children. I could make highlight on the backlogs that we're confronted with in infrastructure and other nutritional programs, but we'll have to highlight and look on to how do we respond to such so that we don't have a repetitive way, but we're going to speak in progress as we move forward. So you are all welcome. Mr. Brown, I think we should, before that we give the department to continue with the presentation, we should proceed with the program to adapt our minutes so that when we move to our engagements, we know that it's engagement, a way forward, and then we're moving to closure. So let's move to adapt our minutes as a standard procedure. I just wanted to open the meeting and give it an outline so that immediately we move to the department where the DM and the acting DG who could have been identified will therefore lead the department to therefore give us presentations. After all presentations, will therefore give to members to engage and therefore get clarities, and then the department will respond, and then will therefore chant the way forward as to what do we do in terms of, as a committee, how do we adapt and align and make sure that we play our oversight. So members, as you know that we've got a standard procedure. These are the minutes of the 21st of August 2026. We had a virtual meeting platform. For all those who were present, you are required, therefore, to amend, make additions, aligned properly as we are all in the meeting. If there are no issues to amend, we can therefore adapt the minutes and therefore move to the department to immediately give us presentations. Members, can I see hands of amendments or any other issues that would want to align, as we could have received the minutes in time, so that we're able to rectify if things are not according. I see a hand of Honorable Jordan. The platform is yours.
Thank you, Honorable. I move to adopt the minutes, and then also just to query, I think in our last meeting, the chair had mentioned that there's a set of minutes that is not quite yet ready from a meeting that we had the previous week. Could we just have a response on that? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable Jordan. Mr. Brown, there's a submission of the sets of minutes where the chair reiterated that we might have to adapt a set of minutes. Can we maybe get indication if they're ready or when they get them? While we are waiting for a second. Thank you.
No, thank you. Thank you, Honorable Low. Thanks, Honorable Jordan, for the question. The minutes she was referring to was this set of minutes, which was the minutes of last Friday, the 21st. If members would just note that we've had back 2 sets of meetings per week for the last 2 weeks. So, the minutes of the 21st would not have been ready, unfortunately, for Tuesday the 25th. And that is why we are adopting this minutes now. And now we have 1 set of minutes remaining, which is now the minutes of Tuesday the 25th, which was now Tuesday past. And those minutes, we normally have 3 working days to submit those minutes. And that 3 days is today. And those minutes will be made available to members in due course. And those minutes will only be adopted. Those minutes, as well as the ones for this meeting, will probably only be adopted at our first meeting in the 4th term. I'm not sure if I hope members understand what I'm trying to indicate. So we are not behind with any minutes. It's just that we've now had 2 sets of meetings over 2 weeks. And so the last set of minutes to be adopted would be the ones of the 21st, which was last Friday. And following that, we will still have to adopt the minutes of Tuesday the 25th and the minutes for this meeting. And that will happen at our first meeting in the 4th term. Thank you, members.
Thank you very much. I saw a thumbs up from Honorable Jordan. I think we are quite clarified with what we have said. It's quite aligned on when we understand and we can relate with that. Can we get a seconder for the minutes? Ma'am Kaba?
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair. Greeting to you and members in the platform, the department, and all our support staff. I rise to second the adoption of the minute, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, honour members. The minutes are duly adapted. We will therefore DM the good morning once more again. Dear Kenta, I hope that you are great, Minister. If the Minister is also here, good morning. We will therefore hand over to the department, to the delegation as per the protocol, so that they can lead both their presentations, and then thereafter we'll give members to engage, and then we'll therefore move to chant the way forward. Thank you very much. DM, Minister, I'm not sure, I'm not seeing the Minister, if the Minister is here. If not, then the DM will lead the delegation to give over for the presentation. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair. I saw the minister in the meeting. Or maybe it has kicked her out, but she was in the meeting. Yeah, she is in the meeting.
Oh, hey, Ngiyaxolisa baphathi bami, greeting to you. Minister and Deputy Minister, benganibonanga. Thank you.
No, akungxaki, Chair. I'm here.
Okay, no, sorry, Minister. Hence, I was saying, I saw also you were here. Hence, I was saying, Minister or DM, but I'm glad that you are here. So, thank you. Over to you, Minister. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much, Chairperson, for the opportunity to address you today. And of course, as I always indicate to the to the Portfolio Committee, we are always incredibly grateful to be able to account to you as our Portfolio Committee, because it is an incredibly important accountability mechanism. And so today, Chairperson, we are here, we are presenting on the Children's Amendment Bill. We're incredibly happy that eventually, I know that the Portfolio Committee was incredibly anxious with us, ensuring that we get the Children's Amendment Bill through to Parliament. And we are happy that it is finally here. And so it will be sent through to Parliament in, I think, in the next coming days. So now what is just left for us to do is just a few amendments that we need to do. But at least Parliament will now be able to engage on the Children's Amendment Bill. This bill is quite important, Chair, because the first year of a child's life is to establish the foundations upon which future learning is built. Yet, we know that access to quality early learning remains a challenge, particularly for children in poorer and underserved communities. And so the Children's Amendment Bill seeks to address some of the regulatory barriers that are contributing to that inequality. So the bill proposes consolidating the regulation of ECD under revised Chapter 6 of the Children's Act and under the authority of the Basic Education Department. As you recall, this function was moved a couple of years ago or over through to the Department of Basic Education from the Department of Social Development. Importantly, it also seeks to replace the current two-stage registration system for a single registration process, one that sets norms and standards for the ECD program. But before the department takes members through the substance of the bill, I really would like to acknowledge the considerable amount of work that has brought us to this point. Officials from the department working through with the technical task team, alongside colleagues from other departments and the ECD sector, have undertaken an extensive process of policy development, consultation, and legal review. In May this year, Cabinet approved the bill for introduction to Parliament. We are now in the final stages of making the necessary proofs for parliamentary processing. I think this is also an important milestone, but it certainly is not the end of the process. Once it's introduced, Parliament will now exercise its legislative responsibility, and South Africans will have the opportunity to engage with this important piece of legislation through the parliamentary processes. And so we look forward to that. The future of our nation depends on the foundations we build today, whether through legislation, the quality early learning, the support that we provide to practitioners, or the opportunities that we create for every young child to keep to their development. And so then, Chairperson, on the second item, we are equally exercised by the fundamental question: are our children in the system genuinely capable of being accommodated, and are being accommodated with including those who require additional and specialized support? There has been some great progress through the adoption of the Education White Paper 6. My predecessor, Minister Motshekga, had appointed a ministerial task team, which has done incredible work in progressing and reviewing the Education White Paper 6. We've expanded the number of the full service schools increased access to specialized support, and continue to strengthen the inclusion of learners with disabilities within the public education system. But we must also be candid, honorable members, and say that access alone does not amount to inclusion. A learner may technically be enrolled in a school, but still experience exclusion. And if that school is physically inaccessible, it is appropriate. If not appropriate, and it's not an appropriate learning space, then we must ask ourselves, are we really providing the kind of access? We must also remain concerned about children with disabilities who are not yet appropriately placed within the schooling system. I have no doubt in my mind that we are going to receive a lot of questions from members who are saying, but there are many, many, many learners who are yet to receive the kind of access that we speak about. And then, Chairperson, when we speak about these learners, we should not speak about them just about the challenges that they face. The department's presentation also demonstrates the achievement of learners with special educational needs in the 2025 National Senior Certificate exams. I want to take the opportunity to congratulate those learners, and members will be able to hear about the incredible achievements that they have achieved. The ongoing review of White Paper 6 therefore gives us an important opportunity to reflect honestly on the work that we still need to do. For me, the principle remains quite straightforward. A child's disability, the support they need, their geographic location, or family circumstances should never determine whether that child has the opportunity to receive a quality education. Chair, before concluding and handing over the department, I'd also like to take this opportunity to speak directly to our matric learners across the country, many of whom are already beginning their preliminary examinations. The coming weeks are important and an important part of the journey towards the National Senior Certificate exams. I want to wish them well. Go out there, make your schools, your teachers, and your parents and your guardians incredibly proud. Thank you very much, Chairperson. I'm going to hand over now to the department.
Thank you very much, Minister. Thank you. What an insightful opening, and that is quite highlighting on issues of importance, as it's quite dealing with issues of giving feedback, and it resonates what the committee could have wanted previously and what would have aligned. But let's therefore give to the department as per the presenters. Thank you very much, Minister.
Thank you very much, Honourable Chairperson. Good morning to all the honourable members, and including our Minister and our DM. The first presentation on the Children's Amendment Bill will be done by Dr. Kotze. So I'll ask her if she could please start with that presentation. Thank you very much.
Good morning, honourable members. Good morning, Minister and senior management. Let me just share my slides. I'm also going to ask just to alert me if I'm not audible or clear. I have been receiving an unstable connection warning sign on my side. I'm in the department. So I can then just switch to hotspotting if that's needed. But thank you, honourable members, for this opportunity. We really appreciate it. I think as was shared by the Minister, we're very excited to say that we're in the final stages of the Children's Amendment Bill. This has been quite an extensive process, and we are very excited about how this bill can really make significant changes to support us in increasing access to quality early childhood development, particularly focusing on the most vulnerable children in our country. So the purpose today is to brief Portfolio Committee on the bill as it was approved by Cabinet in May 2026 for introduction to Parliament. In summary, the bill seeks to streamline the early childhood development function by consolidating ECD regulation under one revised Chapter 6, so that it's under the sole authority of the Department of Basic Education. We know that the Children's Act is mostly under the custodianship of the Minister of Social Development, and the intention of consolidating ECD within one chapter allows basic education then to have sole authority over early childhood development. And by streamlining or by consolidating, it means that we'll be introducing a single registration process, one set of norms and standards for ECD programs, which will enable us to reduce the red tape and really enable us as basic education to extend support to the most vulnerable ECD programs in our country. We know that early childhood development is reflected in the National Development Plan, where it commits to universal access to early childhood development by 2030. We know that the basic right for ECD finds its foundation in Section 29(1)(a) of the Constitution, which declares that everyone has a right to basic education. We know that it's a priority of the 7th administration through the medium-term development plan, and we know in the recent State of the Nation address, the President also declared the expansion of access to early childhood development a presidential priority. So the ills that we seek to solve through this bill is very particularly to say how can we reduce red tape, how can we reduce current overlap, reduce misalignment and reduce exclusion. As the Act is currently written, it really undermines our central goal closing the early learning access and quality gaps by creating these onerous and exclusionary registration and funding solutions. I think as honourable members are aware, we've been doing the mass registration drive, but we've had to do this within the current rules of the game by the current legislation. And there are just many hurdles that we cannot get over because of what the legislation requires us to do. There's currently a lot of red tape. Provincial education departments must administer these 2 registration processes, each with their own set of norms and standards. This is not very efficient, and it's really not helping us to be strategic in how we allocate our capacity. And very importantly, it's really locking out the most vulnerable children from accessing the government subsidy, and it's really deterring us from establishing new ECD programs. There's also currently overlap between the Children's Act and the norms and standards there with, for instance, the National Environmental Health Norms and Standards by the Department of Health. So there's this overlap and duplication of responsibilities, especially regarding the responsibilities that relate to health and safety. And it's currently creating confusion in the sector. And again, it's wasting resources and capacity both on our side and on local government side, duplicating efforts at this point. There's misalignment. We know that the norms and standards for ECD programs were written historically by social development, and the regulatory framework doesn't really cross-reference or reflect the national curriculum framework. And again, it really undermines our ability to provide and really put quality on statutory footing. And it's exclusionary. We know that if we want to rapidly expand access to ECD programs, we have to recognize home and community-based programs, but the legislation doesn't do that, and the norms and standards are not tailored to enable these community-based sites to be registered easily. And this contributes to the lack of access in lower income communities. So just if we compare the current position of the Act with the proposed changes on the key strategic changes, we know that the proclamation has shifted the responsibility of early childhood development from the Minister and MECs of Social Development to the Minister and MECs of Basic Education, but that's not reflected in the main body of the Act yet. And this amendment will just put that and make that very clear. We are redefining the definition and scope of an ECD program by broadening it to any program, including both the venue and the content that provides care, development, and early learning support from birth to school-going age. So whereas the current Act has program and the structure in 2 separate chapters. In one streamlined chapter, we'll have one definition for an ECD program. It says that a strategy needs to be developed and re-aimed at coordinating equitable provision. Provinces must run an electronic data management system. We need to profile child demographics and prioritize underserved low-income areas and monitor municipalities. And this will really enable us to collect information on all children across ECD programs and really put a legal mandate on ECD programs to enable us to have this information, especially on children, to help us in terms of our planning and particularly planning to reach the most vulnerable children. We are redefining the norms and standards. So we're firstly streamlining the norms and standards that's currently between the two different chapters. And we will now have 10 specific monitorable domains, including things like group size, adult-child ratios, disability support, child protection, staff qualifications, health and safety and nutrition, so that we, through our norms and standards, again, reflect the importance we want to put on quality early childhood provisioning. We are clarifying what we mean by conditional registration by specifically stating that the minister may publish a national conditional registration framework. We're clarifying that the responsibility for health and safety sits with the National Environmental Health Norms and Standards with the Department of Health. And as basic education, our key focus in our norms and standards will focus on the early learning component. And then in terms of local government, we're making provision for the development of a standard draft bylaw for ECD programs in local governments, again, with this purpose and focus on how do we standardize requirements for registration across local government, but then also engage and involve local government in supporting the early childhood development function. So if we just think of the process to date, I think it's helpful just to be reminded that this bill wasn't initiated originally on basic education side. It was originally drafted on social development side, and they have actually taken it to their portfolio committee, and the bill therefore benefited from the public consultation process of the portfolio committee. But at that point, the Children's Amendment Bill still retained this two-stage registration system. It was just before the function shift, and the Portfolio Committee for Social Development at that point sent the bill back and said that basic education will need to lead on this bill given the function shift. Subsequently, the Director General set up a special technical task team in 2021. This was co-chaired by Basic Education and Social Development, and we had representatives of Department of Health, Department of Cooperative Governance, and SALGA, the Local Government Association, on the task team. And again, this emanated from the concerns that were raised by the Portfolio Committee of Social Development at the time, to say that we really need to have this much stronger participation of these intergovernmental organizations and departments, so that we can really draft a very strong bill. We therefore comprehensively redrafted the bill with input from the technical task team, but also benefiting from the public consultation that was already undertaken at that point. We then gazetted the bill for the new bill or the revised bill for public comment in May 2024. We analysed all the comments. We made further amendments to the bill. The bill also benefited from extensive input from the Office of the Chief State Law Advisor since 2024. We then got it approved by all our internal structures. We got approval from OXLA as well as from DPME through the SAYAS process earlier this year, and then took it to Cabinet for their approval. Just to look at the consultations leading up to the process, I think as I've mentioned, we really benefited from extensive consultations during both our public comment process in May, but also the one that were held before Basic Education received the bill. So the early submission on DSD's Children's Amendment Bill, we benefited from comments from over 42 ECD organizations. We got more than 1,645 submissions, and 1,495 of these were particularly from ECD practitioners and caregivers. We took it through our internal structures. We took it to the Council of Education Ministers. We also had one-on-one, very focused meetings with, for instance, the Department of Health, where we clarified this roles and responsibilities for health and safety. We also met specifically with the Department of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs, as well as with SALGA, where both of them was very supportive of the introduction of a standard draft bylaw that will facilitate a more standardized approach by municipalities. And the wording for that clause in the bill was actually sponsored by the legal team of DCOC in the end. And then the sectoral engagement. We had the Intersectoral Forum for Early Childhood Development represented on the technical task team, but we also took the bill for engagement with the Intersectoral Forum on various occasions to ensure that the sector is well aware of what we're proposing, and we're constantly keeping them abreast of where we are with the bill. In terms of an implementation plan, I think the key element that the bill will introduce is this streamlined single registration process and integrate this. And we will be integrating this in our progress that we've made on the Banapele mass registration drive. We now have a centralized digital registration system, and once the bill is passed, we can make the updates on the system and we can implement this through the change forums and just the execution arm of the Banapele registration drive. In terms of financial, organizational, and personnel implications, the key obligation that this is putting on provinces specifically is the record keeping of data on ECD programs, and we've got the Early Childhood Administration reporting system for this. And during the 2025-26 medium-term expenditure framework, National Treasury has allocated resources to provinces through the ECD conditional grant to help us with additional human resources, tools of trade, and capital costs for implementing this system. I think as the chairperson also mentioned in the opening remarks, funding for this ECD programs in this bill is at this point discretionary and not mandatory. And the big reason for this is that at this point, if we had to make it mandatory and we have to benchmark the cost for early childhood development against the cost for grade R, we are looking at an annual cost of about 96 billion rand annually. Currently, our cost is 6 billion, or our budget is 6 billion annually. So it will be exorbitant cost for us to be able to do that. So it's not immediately realizable. And I think some of what we are working with National Treasury on is how do we progressively get to where we need to be, knowing that at this point in time, we cannot realize that immediately. So if we look at risks and mitigation, if we look at onboarding the sector on the new regulatory regime, that is just how do we get all ECD programs to understand the new norms and standards. I think through the Banapele mass registration drive, we've really built that muscle of information sharing. We've developed user-friendly guidelines and tools, and these can be updated, and through our communication channels, we can continuously support ECD programs with us. Similarly, how do we bring our district and provincial staff on board with the new norms and standards? Again, through our change forums, through our current structures with districts and provinces where we are doing the change management on the Banapele mass registration drive, we can leverage that and update that with the new implementation tools and guidelines. I think the big risk is this, if we had to make it mandatory, I think that will be a significant fiscal risk to our country. And that's why we said at this point it is discretionary, but we have a funding strategy that we have co-created with National Treasury to say how do we progressively increase funding to the ECD sector. And the 10 billion that was allocated in the 2025-26 medium-term expenditure framework was the first step in this strategy. So we are busy implementing that strategy, but we have to work on the progressive realization of this, or not to bankrupt our country. And then in terms of weak municipal implementation, this is an ongoing challenge, and the standard draft bylaw will already help us in strengthening that. And then through the local government campaign that we've launched earlier this year, and we've been onboarding municipalities on the Banapele process, we can again use those relationships and those structures to then update them on the bylaw that was drafted. In terms of communication, we have been engaging with the sector quite widely around this bill, but we will work in collaboration with government communication and information systems to constantly keep role players up to date with the developments of the bill. In terms of constitutional implications, the Office of the Chief State Law Advisors have certified that this bill is consistent with the Constitution. In terms of implications, our main beneficiaries here are preschool children. I think if this bill is passed, it will enable us to increase access to ECD programs and help us to provide better quality early childhood development programs. For parents, it would mean more equitable access to affordable childcare that enables them to work. For ECD programs, it means reduced red tape, streamlined registration, greater viability, enabling them to access pre-registration support, the subsidy, and more appropriate facilities. And it will have a better recognition of the diverse ECD delivery models that's required in our country if we want to expand access, especially in the most vulnerable areas. For employees, it could mean improved pay and conditions by having improved access to pre-registration support and improved access to the ECD subsidy. For women and young adults, it means new employment and micro-enterprise development opportunities, as this bill will enable us to expand access much more rapidly. And then in lower income communities, we recognize that these ECD programs that make micro enterprises really stimulate the local economy and really helps under-resourced communities through this as well. We haven't identified any security implications of this. We have mentioned the responses we've received from the bill from departments with health supporting this recognition of an alignment of responsibility around health and safety standards, cooperative governance, and SALGA both really supporting the introduction of a standard draft bylaw. So, yeah, we recognize that the bill has been approved by Cabinet for introduction to Parliament. As the Minister mentioned, it is in the final stages of finalising the proofs for parliamentary processing. We're hoping to have this done with the Office of the Chief State Law Advisor very, very soon. And then we would kindly like to request the Portfolio Committee's support in processing this bill further through the parliamentary processes. Thank you very much, honourable members.
Thank you very much. Okay.
I just wanted to check with you, Honourable Chairperson. So do we go on to the next presentation, or do we take questions on this presentation? You can guide me.
We go to the next one, and then after then I'll hand over the chair. I see is online. We'll give back to the chair immediately for questioning and then for members. So let's do another presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Chairperson. So the next presentation, I'll ask Dr. Mthembu to introduce, and I think that the presentation will be done by Mr. Ngobo, who is in the house as well. Over to you, Dr. Mthembu.
Thank you, DDG Kaya, and good morning, Chairperson of the meeting, and good morning to the honorable members of the Portfolio Committee. We are going to table a presentation here which covers what the acting chairperson outlined at the beginning, and Mr. Ngobo will take us through. May I request Mr. Ngobo to do the presentation?
Thank you, DDG. Good morning, Honorable Chair and members. I'm going to be taking you through the presentation. I'm going to share the presentation. May I check, Honorable Chairperson, whether the presentation is visible?
Yes, it is feasible, but I see the cursor is still moving. I hope that it's quite flexible to move around, but it's feasible. Thanks. Yeah, it's fine.
Chair, that's the presentation outline. You would see it's quite a comprehensive presentation, but I will highlight key issues that are emerging from the presentation. And that's the purpose of the presentation, to present to the Portfolio Committee on the implementation of inclusive education, focusing specifically on learners with disabilities. Chair, we are governed by specific obligations internationally, regionally, and domestically. I'm not going to sit on them, but these are highlighted in the presentation. I would like to specifically highlight the Convention on the Rights of the Child, which has the Article 28 of which asserts the right of every child to education, and also calls for inclusive education that respects the child's dignity and promotes their full development. Chair, I would like to also reference the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, which the country ratified in 2007, and specifically with regards to the education, Article 24 of that convention, which asserts that we need to, as a country, work towards inclusive education, especially for children with disabilities in ordinary schools, which it calls general schools. But also, Chair, I would like to reference the SDGs, where specifically SDG 4.5, which talks to the inclusivity of education, whose time frame is 2030. The Chair, here I would like to reference the strategy to for persons with disabilities, including in education, and which I think it's a very important development. But also, Chair, I would like to reference our own constitution, the right to a basic education, which is guaranteed for everyone. But what is different about the right to basic education in South Africa is that the Constitutional Court has reframed it as immediately realizable, but also as having no internal qualifiers, which means that it is unconditional. But also our own South African Schools Act, which governs the governance of schools. But you will see with the latest developments that the act has been amended in terms of ensuring that every child has access to basic education. Then, Chair, the overarching framework for building an inclusive education and training system in South Africa, which is captured in Education White Paper 6, provide the roadmap in terms of how the country will go about building an inclusive education system. Chair, I'm not going to sit on that, but Chair, I would like to map out a background briefly that the mandate of basic education is to provide an environment where everyone, in terms of its constitutional mandate, have access to lifelong learning, education and learning opportunities. And therefore, access is an important issue here because it must be actualized to enable all citizens to improve the quality of their lives and to be able to contribute meaningfully to the welfare of their communities and society in general. And in this country, we are using inclusive education as a mechanism to do this. We've registered quite significant progress, but we acknowledge that there are still challenges that we still need to deal with as a sector. So this part of the presentation provides a glimpse into where we are. You will see that we're comparing 2 years here. We've moved in terms of the number of special schools. Chair, I must indicate that if you read the convention, you will see that this is one of area that we need to manage as a country, because we constantly asked why are we increasing the number of special schools, because the convention guides us in terms of increasing access to access for learners with disabilities in public ordinary schools. So this is one area that the sector is focusing on in terms of ensuring that there is access for learners with disabilities in public ordinary schools. You will see that we are sitting at 85,082 already of learners with disabilities in public ordinary schools, which is a good development. But we are sitting at 121,459 learners and with disabilities in special schools. But we do have learners who are in community-based special care centers. I must indicate that this number is going down, but what is happening is that as it goes down, so we see more learners coming from communities. But I think what that is happening, what that is doing is that it provides an opportunity it has provided an opportunity for the sector to place these children in school. You will see when I reference the placement of these children in schools that we are making inroads, although it's still early stages. This is the provincial breakdown of learners with disabilities in special schools. Chair, I'm not gonna sit on it. It's disaggregated in terms of gender. And this is the number of learners with disabilities in public ordinary schools, also disaggregated in terms of gender and provincially. Chair, this is the expenditure as at 31 March 2026. We're sitting at 99.1%, which is, Chair, very good expenditure. We acknowledge the fact that we could have spent this 0.9%, but it's something that that the sector is working diligently to make sure. And this is 2026, Chair. This is a repeat, Chair. This, Chair, is the MTF allocation for special schools. You will see that for 2025 there was.
I see
Yes,
that the slide is not moving ever since it said basic education. So can you maybe try to see? I apologize to interrupt, but the slide is not moving, and ever since that you started, I see also a hand of Honorable Jordan. Honorable Jordan. Okay.
No, acting chair, that's what I was going to say. The slides have not been moving.
Okay, no, thanks a lot. I also thought that maybe it's my network, but I realize it's all of us. Thank you very much for that.
And it must also be put on a slide mode. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, DM. Please put on slide mode. Yebo.
It's on slide mode, Chair. Let me check if we are on the MTF allocation. Chair, let me continue then. For 2025, we're sitting at 6% of the increase. And for 2026, you will see that there is a slightly lesser increase of 4%. I think that's in line with the fiscal conditions in the country, but there is still allocation. You'll see that for KZN we're sitting at 5%, but also for Western Cape we're sitting at 5%. So although there was a decrease, but there were provinces that were considered quite favorably in terms of the then access for the country has moved in terms of ensuring that there is access to basic education for this category of children. So I'm going to be speaking to the conditional grant, and I am aware that the portfolio committee is the honourable members are quite aware of it. So I'm going to go straight to what we have in terms of the conditional grant. So that's the MTF allocations for the conditional grant. We're sitting at 307.3 million for this current financial year. For next year, we're gonna move to 322 million. That's about 15 million more, which is quite good given the fiscal environment. Then after that, in the outer year, we're gonna be moving at 337 million, which is given to which is transferred to the provinces. This is the payment schedule. You will see here that we've paid we've made two transfers. The last one we made on the 14th of August, which was 76.8 million. The next tranche is on the 19th of November, and the last tranche will be in January. And these are disaggregated in terms of what provincial education departments will be receiving. So this is the expenditure as at the end of the financial year. We're sitting at 99%, which is quite good. But you would say that there are two provinces that are quite concerning in terms of the expenditure. Free State and Northwest are still quite concerning. We are working closely with these provincial education departments to ensure that they improve on the expenditure. This has involved the line functions that are implicated in the delays that we are experiencing there. This Chair, Honorable Chair, you will remember that within this grant there are provincial officials that have been appointed permanently, and these are provincial grant managers. We have 2 vacancies in Free State and Western Cape. We know that Western Cape will be filling the vacancy soon, and also Free State. Free State ones became vacant in the beginning of April this year. And these are the teams also. There are teams that have been permanently employed at provincial level to work in the conditional grant. We're sitting at 232. And the reason for why we are not at 255 is that...
Chair, I've been raising my hand. I'm sorry to interrupt it. The slides again are not moving. The slides are not moving at all.
Chairperson, if I may come in as well, I think it's because the way in which the presentation is being done. Although Mr. Ngobo said it was in presentation mode, what we are seeing is not in presentation mode. And so that's why it moves on his side, but it's not moving on our side as what we see. I'm not sure if we will allow him to fix it.
Let's do this. Sorry, thanks, Honorable Spees, for your intervention. I was a bit engaged on the other side. But what I'm thinking we should do, can we ask Mr. Brown to intervene if he's able to with the presentation, so that we are able not to waste time, so that we are able to be proactive, because I can also see that it is not in the slide mode and we've been raising it, that it must be put properly. So Mr. Brown, are you able to intervene?
That's fine, Honorable Low. If the presenter can just remove his... Okay, there we go. Let me try quickly. Just give me 1 second.
Thank you so much, Mr. Brown. Then we can proceed. And we apologize, members and colleagues, for that particular technicality. We can therefore proceed properly, therefore, without any hindrance. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I apologize for that. That's the system issue. And I think we were on the slide on the transversal outreach teams. We can go down, Mr. Brown. You can proceed until you get to the conditional grant. You can proceed. Yeah, that's that lot. Can proceed again. That was showing the... You can go back a bit. Go back a bit. Yeah, that's where we are. Thank you very much. So I was saying that we're sitting at 232 out of 255, and the reason for the variance is the high cost of, largely in certain provinces, that the certain provinces in terms of the cost of the compensation of employees, they've reached their ceiling, although their allocation was at 200, the allocation was 255. But you would see that it's not a train smash, because but also the learners are being placed in school, so we are transferring that support to schools. You can go to the next slide. And the next slide is showing the services that have been provided to learners, and the target was that we will reach 2,660, and we're on track, because at this time we're sitting at 2,097, and the last column is showing the services that were provided to children. You can go to the next slide. We have developed a learning program for these children, and I must indicate that this is one of the first in Africa. So in other words, we now have access to the curriculum for these children. But I think what is important is that instead of developing a separate curriculum, the department took the CAPS and differentiated the CAPS into the learning program, life skills, numeracy, and literacy. And this is for the children with profound intellectual disabilities. The slide is showing you the numbers that are taught, 3,691. And you see that there are actually 4,039 of learners with profound intellectual disability. You will see that there is a slight discrepancy in access for all of them. And this is caused by various factors. And we're working diligently with provinces to make sure that they are able to make sure that these children have access. But you will see that we're also dealing with those that are less than 5 years. They are also accessing the learning program. We're sitting at 193 who are having access to the learning program. You can go to the next slide. These slides are going to show you the placement trends, because as the department, we have an intervention where we are placing out of school children in schools, because we believe that's where the package of services is the most adequate. So we started the intervention in 2024, and I'm going to be showing you the trends in terms of that. You can go to the next slide. Yeah, the next slide is indicating that the Director General established a dedicated multidisciplinary team with all the relevant line functions within the sector, but also with sister departments such as the Department of Health, Social Development, Transport, and Women as part of that task team, because it dawned to us that this was a task that required all the line functions, all the relevant line functions, but not only the line functions, but also our sister departments to work together to ensure that these children are placed. This task team is co-chaired by the Department of Basic Education and Social Development. And amongst the work of this team, the DG has issued Circular S28 of 2023, which guides provinces in terms of the placement of out of school learners in schools. But because when we were placing, there were human resource issues that were surfacing and that were blocking the placement, the department then had a bilateral requested permission from National Treasury to use a portion of the conditional grant to appoint class assistants and caregivers. And the guidance in terms of that approval from National Treasury is contained in Circular S4 of 2026, which guides the provinces in terms of how they should utilize the 3% of their allocation. I must indicate that all the provinces have applied for the deviation, and this has been approved, and provinces are appointing. These are placement trends. Can proceed, Mr. Brown. These are placement trends. You will see that we've placed 1,258 learners since 2023. But I must indicate that that number is not a completely accurate reflection of the work, because some of the learners do not go through the community-based special care centers to be placed, so they go directly from communities. So we're trying to set up a system currently to track those children, to track the number of those children. So we're working closely with provinces through EMIS to make sure that these are also captured. You can go to the next slide. Yeah, and the part of what we have done to deal with some of the issues that were surfacing in the placement is that we thought that it was necessary for us to have bilaterals with provincial heads of department. So we've had such bilaterals with the provincial heads of Mpumalanga and KwaZulu-Natal. And this has helped in ensuring that provincial heads of department have a good understanding of what is required, but also what they can assist with. In particular, we've seen progress in Mpumalanga, where the HOD went ahead and took the matter to the cluster committee, and the cluster committee, following that, took a decision to make this matter a standing item in their meetings. But we've also been doing work with school principals. We've done that with Gauteng, Mpumalanga, Free State, and Northwest, where we are we are raising awareness and requesting concurrence with principals to allow the children in public ordinary schools in particular. But we've also engaged school governing bodies in Gauteng and Northwest to make sure that their governance protocols are aligned with inclusive education. And I must indicate that there's been a lot of interest and welcoming. I think also given the human resource injection that we have that have been approved by National Treasury. You can go to the next one. Yeah. Yeah, you can go to the next one. And I think the other issue that we wanted to look at was the issue of course, when we were placing, there was a need for some of the learners to be exempted from compulsory attendance, not compulsory education, but compulsory attendance. So what we've done is this DPE is that we've developed draft guidelines to guide provincial education departments, to guide the heads of department in terms of the implementation of Section 4 of the South African Schools Act. So it outlines those issues. It clarifies that exemption from compulsory attendance is not exemption from the right to basic education, emphasizes reasonable accommodation, non-discrimination, and the best interest of the child, and provides guidance for learners with profound intellectual disabilities, how they are going to access support. And it also provides standardized application and monitoring and appeal templates that can be used. You can go to the next slide. And this work is being currently piloted field tested in 2 provinces, Gauteng and Northwest. We wanted to make sure that we assess the practicality and applicability of the draft guidelines before they get approved. But also wanted to identify implementation challenges, administrative requirements, and the support needs. And we have already obtained feedback from these 2 provincial education departments in June. And what we are currently doing now is to adapt. We're estimating that there will be piloting for a period of 2 to 3 years, and after which then we'll have a final document. You can go to the next slide. Yeah, the issue that we picked up was that there was a need for an intensive advocacy as we place to deal with the stigma, to deal with the stereotypes around disability. So what we did was to develop a communication, information, and advocacy plan, and this plan is across the sector to ensure consistent, accurate, and targeted messaging, because there was a lot of misaligned communication. But also we wanted to communicate the sector's strategic direction, priorities, and activities regarding the implementation of inclusive education. In other words, making the message on inclusive education more coherent. You can go to the next slide. Yeah, these are some of the activities that we have engaged in, but I would like to pull out 2 of them. One of them is the monthly newsletter that we issue on inclusive education. We're going to be issuing the 4th issue at the end of August. But we also have targeted sessions for staff at DPE. The DG approved 1 hour a month for what is called monthly lunchbox lekgutla on inclusive education. You can go to the next slide. Yeah, these are some of that's the front page of the issue of the newsletter, which is called the Inclusive Education Digest. You can go to the next slide. Yeah, can go to the next slide. These are sessions that we've had in terms of the lunchbox lekgutla on inclusive education, and so part of that is that we've looked at children that are out of school and raise awareness. And I've already indicated about about our issues on our monthly newsletter, the Inclusive Education Digest. You can go to the next slide. And these are some. This is an example of the invitation to this session. You can go to the next slide. This is the newsletter, the Inclusive Education Digest. One of the pages there. You can go to the next slide. Yeah, they can go to the next slide. That is what we use. But also the Director General also established the engagements, regular engagements with the organizations representing persons with disabilities. You can go to the next slide. And this was to ensure that we provide a structured mechanism for collaborative dialogue, shared problem solving, and exchange of knowledge. But we wanted to reposition these organizations in a different way as a resource rather than the consumers of basic education. And I must indicate that there is work that is happening with them now in terms of advancing the strategic direction, but also the strategic priorities of the sector, but also ensuring that there was collaboration rather than misaligned working with these organizations, so that we can all advance the right and the best interests of the child, especially children with disabilities. Can go to the next slide. So we've had like four high-level meetings for 2024-25, and we've had support in terms of implementing the Circular S28. And there has been work that is going on between ECD and for instance the blind SA, which is advancing the work. So in other words, this has helped the sector to collaborate with these organizations to ensure that we can advance the right to a basic education for learners with disabilities. You can go to the next slide. Yeah, the next slide is the work that we understood the decision by the president to move ECD to basic education as providing an opportunity for early identification in an intervention at that level. So what we've done is that we've been working with in partnership with the Department of Health and UNICEF, with a focus on strengthening practical systems at each ECD level. In other words, looking at how can we intervene effectively at that level as basic education. Can go to the next slide. And what we have done is that we have identified particular issues that are at that level, that this provides a good opportunity for us to deal with the matter. So what we did was then to embark on an early intervention and early identification and intervention exercise. Can go to the next slide. Working directly with parents at that level. So what we did was to first develop a national screening tool, and this was field tested with 40 families in Orange Farm, and it was found to be useful, to be user-friendly, practical, and accessible. I must indicate that when we say families, it also included caregivers, and it has also been versioned in languages that are appropriate for various institutions. But as part of that also, there was a need to infuse inclusive education in the training of ECD practitioners. So what we have now is an online inclusion course for ECD practitioners, which practitioners are enrolled in. But we also worked with the Department of Health in terms of the hearing screening program, which we implemented using what is called Kuti wave audiometers. And here we screened 62 children in Ratanda, and multiple cases that required referral were identified, and the children were referred to the Department of Health. You can go to the next slide. The next slide is showing you the learners that were supported in terms of that program, 47,505. You can go to the next slide. Yeah. Then we also realized that there was a need to make teachers ready in specific areas of that will advance inclusive education. So the next slides are going to be showing you that. These are the numbers for 2025-2026. We trained 19,321 teachers, and this is disaggregated in terms of provinces. Can go to the next slide. Yeah, that's a narrative for what that slide is showing, but it also shows you the areas that we focus on: SASL, autism, the policy on CS, differentiated teaching strategies, as well as accommodations and concessions. But also we've included literacy and numeracy strategies, which are critical for foundational learning. Can go to the next slide. The next slide is showing you Q1. You will see that there are dashes for Q1. It's because most of the training starts in Q2. But we're showing this to show you that there are provinces that were able to start with the training in Q1, giving us 8,452 for inclusive programs. But all in all, we trained 10,615 teachers in Q1. You can go to the next slide. That's a narrative for the previous slide. Can move to the next slide. This is the training on the South African Sign Language and the policy on CS for Q1. You will see that we registered 862 for SASL and 10,037 for the policy on CS. Can go to the next slide. Yeah, you can go to the next slide. Yeah. And the other issue is I think the issue that the minister highlighted in terms of the performance of learners with disabilities in the National Senior Certificate. Can go to the next slide. Here we are showing you the trends in terms of performance. You will see that we're showing 2023, 24 to 25. You will see that there has been an increase in terms of the number of learners who are writing in each instance, 5,288 in 2023, but in 2025, 10,188, which is about almost double the number of learners that were entered. You can go to the next slide. These are the accommodations, and accommodations are important in ensuring that learners are able to perform on par with other learners. We're talking here about learners who require additional support. So in 2024, we had 10,737. You would see that that was almost double the number in 2025, which is due to the awareness that we are raising in terms of the importance of making sure that learners who are eligible for accommodations are awarded. So go to the next slide. Yeah, these are the accommodation types. I'm not going to sit on them. It's a breakdown of the accommodation types that were awarded in 2024. You can go to 2025. Those are for 2025. That's the breakdown of the accommodations awarded. You can go to the next slide. So these are for endorsed concessions. You will see that there are quite few. There are quite few because there has been a decrease on the focus on the endorsed concessions. So what we've been focusing on is the mainstream concessions. That is why you are seeing a decrease in those numbers. And this is actually a good sign than a bad sign. You can go to the next slide. This is for maths, and there are concessions for maths, and showing you the numbers for maths, showing you that in 2025 with 392. These are language concessions, and these are, yes, language concessions 2025. This is the achievement. You will see, Chair, that we were sitting at the number road 6,642. 6,642. This is 2024, and we're sitting at the number 89.1. I think we can go to the next slide. For 2025, you're sitting at 90.10. But what you will also notice, Chair, is that there is a slight decrease on the higher certificate, which means that there is an increase in the bachelor's, the diploma, in the bachelor's and the diploma. So these learners are doing quite well if you compare if you compare them with those without disabilities. So we're actually doing well, but we can do much better. But we are getting there. We can move to the next slide. This is SASL, South African Sign Language as a home language. You'll see we're sitting at 90.3%. Can go to the next slide. Then we also have the Second Chance Matric program, and this is provided to learners who would like to complete their matric. And during the meeting of the portfolio committee in it was recommended that we must expand to cater for learners with disabilities, and this is what we are reporting, that we have expanded support to learners. But we've started with those who are blind, deaf, and partially sighted at the moment. Can go to the next slide. And that shows the provinces that are participating is Limpopo, KZN, and Gauteng and Eastern Cape. And I've indicated that we started with those that are blind, deaf, and partially sighted. We have 83 learners that are registered and accessing support. And we are currently working with other provinces. I know that Western Cape is quite at an advanced stage. And these are the provisioning modalities that we are using: classes over weekends, provisioning of LTSM, provision of meals, because they have to spend a weekend sometimes in these sessions. But we've also provided them with additional devices where this is required. So this is the package of support that learners who are taking the Second Chance Matric program, who are participating in the Second Chance Matric program are getting. Can go to the next slide. So this is the mode of delivery. We're using special schools as centers only over weekends. The support is over 9 months before the exams, but we subsidize schools for the use of their premises. Can go to the next slide. And this is the glimpse into the expansion to other provinces. Western Cape, we're referencing Western Cape there, which has already started in 2026. But we're also working in partnership with the head public libraries and the Council for the Blind SA and Deaf. So this is to ensure that we're aligned with the needs of these learners that we have identified. But plans are also underway to work with social development, because there are issues that require social development. So what we do is we invite others to join and support the project as well, so that so that it can be enhanced. But there are some challenges: unclear information during the registration. So we find that in some cases, it is not the needs of the learners are not properly indicated, creating some challenges. And in some cases, we find that it takes time for the project to gain traction because of various dynamics within the provinces, but also expectations from learners that education should be free. So in other words, we're working towards making sure that we also look at ways in which we can also pay for their transport, because they are currently paying for their, because we are covering accommodation. And this is LTSM provisioning. Can go to the next slide. So it shows each province what has been provided in terms of braille and large print textbooks. And that is a breakdown of delivery. Go to the next slide for 2026. And this is the rest of the provinces. And in certain instances, we are referencing schools that have received support in terms of braille. You can go to the next slide. And in terms of the South African Sign Language, DBA has developed and released a catalog for SASL to provinces for procurement, because procurement happens at provincial level. But we provided guidance in terms of what they could procure. And in terms of braille and large print, DBA procured braille and large print caps, textbooks, master copies for an amount of 13 million. This is a state-owned resource now, and these master copies are also available. And that cut down the cost, because provinces were procuring individually, which was a very high cost. and it cut the cost significantly, making it affordable to provinces. And schools that have machine, they are now able to reproduce the material for the learners. And they do not have, and those that do not have machines, DBE advises schools and provinces to follow the supply chain processes within their provinces for printing. But we think that with the significant cost reduced, provinces are now able to assist schools properly. You can go to the next slide. These are Braille workbooks, and these are workbooks that have been provided. I'm not going to go through each of them. You can go to the next slide. These are Braille workbooks, and they are procured based on the school needs. So we listen to what schools are saying, then we respond. We respond in terms of that. This far, Gauteng has submitted schools which need Braille with the and NSDP. We are working on that. But we also provided workbooks needed by special schools in Gauteng for 2026. We've set aside a budget for producing Braille workbooks as the need arises from special schools. Then the information communication and technology can go to the next slide. This provides a breakdown on the provision of ICT devices, gives you the number of schools, 466 schools, and working with ICASA through Vodacom, MTN, and Liquid Tech, and Cell C, and the number of learner devices per school that have been provided, and the total that benefited, total number of learners that benefited from each school in terms of the ICT devices that were provided to schools, special schools in particular. You can go to the next slide. Yeah. Then the provision of infrastructure, you can go to the next slide. Yeah. For special, it's funded from the Education Infrastructure Grant and implemented by PEDs and monitored by Basic Education. So the outputs are as reflected: the number of new schools, the number of existing school infrastructure upgraded, number of new and existing schools, disaster managed schools. Those are the indicators. Those are the outputs that we are that provinces are implementing and that we are monitoring. Number of new schools provided. Those are the indicators that we are monitoring. You can go to the next slide. That provides the context that the provincial schools program targets new schools in particular. 6,125 projects are in the pipeline, and this commences with project initiation. These are the stages. Each provincial education is required to submit its infrastructure asset management plan, and they identify their targets in terms of the 3-year medium-term expenditure framework, and we monitor progress and quarterly. Section 5 of the regulations relating to the minimum norms and standards for public, it stipulates that schools must adhere to the principles of universal design, ensuring that there is access in the infrastructure. And this provision, it also applies to new schools, additions, alterations. So in other words, the universal design principles are applied across, and all ACD and safe schools are provided. They conform with this provision. Go to the next slide. That's showing you the number of projects 2027. You will see that those that are there are those that are on stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4. In terms of the provinces, but there are those that are at a handover stage, the last but one column, but there are those that are at stage 7, the closeout stage, and those are shown in terms of provinces. Can go to the next slide. These are some of the challenges: lack of accommodation between infrastructure and inclusive education. But I think we've improved quite a lot in terms of that, because we at a national level we are collaborating very closely, and we have our meetings attended by both infrastructure and inclusive education. And in some cases, you find that in terms of reprioritization of projects and budgets, due to over committed projects list, but we're trying to ensure that the budget for committed project is ring fenced and and protected. We also have poor performance from consultants, which is one of the challenges. But we are engaged in continuous engagements with the implementing agents to ensure proper monitoring the expenditure per project, but also lack of appropriate capacity as an impeding factor in the school infrastructure delivery. In this regard, we are working on a process of strengthening infrastructure delivery capacity, which is ongoing. And where required, we are also headhunting in terms of ensuring that there is adequate capacity to deal with the challenges. Can go to the next slide. Scholar transport provisioning, can go to the next slide. These are some of the numbers in terms of the learners transported for Q1. You will see that the number of learners in need is sitting at 76,186. Number of learners targeted just over 75,000. And the number of learners transported in Q1 is sitting at 66,704. That's around 88% of achievement. That indicates that that there is a need to do more here. But largely the issues around the challenges that is that of the fiscal constraints that the sector is under. Can go to the next slide. Then the review of Education White Paper 6. I think the chairperson indicated that the portfolio committee would require a report on this one. But we want to register the fact that the minister, as the honourable members would remember, appointed a ministerial task team in 2023 to do roughly 4 things: to review the implementation of Education White Paper 6, to assess its conceptual and policy framework, but also to evaluate legislative and funding arrangements, and to recommend a future model for inclusive education. The MTT, we are happy to share with the honourable members that the MTT submitted its final report to the Minister on 31 March 2026, and the DBE is undertaking consultation of the report to ensure that when the minister takes a decision on what to do, this is informed by grassroots voices, by everyone that has a stake in inclusive education. So we are currently undertaking that process. But I must indicate that the way in which we've configured, the DG has configured the way in which we work with this is that it involves all the relevant line functions within the sector, but not only the relevant line functions, but also our sister departments as referenced earlier. The Department of Health, the Department of Social Development, Department of Women, Youth and Persons with Disabilities, and the Department of Transport as part of that team. We can go to the next slide. So these are some of the key observations, is that it does not conclude that the MTT did not conclude that Education White Paper 6 was a complete failure. There were challenges flagged, but there were also things that are working. What it found was that Education White Paper 6 established an important foundation for inclusive education. And the central criticism was that these have been implemented unevenly due to various issues provincially, and some of them remained under-resourced, and they were hit hard in terms of due to the fiscal constraints. And in some cases, they continue to operate within a policy architecture that sustains segregation. In other words, there are still signs of the past coming through, which the sector is dealing with. But what the report is advocating for is the strengthening and reconfiguring of the existing gains rather than starting afresh. So the report is not saying that we must start afresh. The report is saying that there are gains that we must make sure that we take advantage of, but there are challenges that we need to deal with. We also have collaborations with particular organizations. We are going to reference 2 here. The first one is Africa Tikkun, and the collaboration focuses on early childhood development, children of school-going age from vulnerable communities, but mobilization and placement of children in schools. Can go to the next slide. And inclusive economic empowerment programs, but also advocating for inclusion for children with disabilities, but also mobilizing resources to enable the inclusion of children and youth with disabilities. But and the last area is research and information sharing amongst ourselves. Can go to the next slide. Can go to the next slide. Want us to look at can go to the next slide. Those slides are referencing the progress. We also have a partnership with the wholesale and retail sector, and these are the areas of collaboration: access to the workplace for practical sessions, contribution to the research agenda, but also promoting an articulation roadmap for schools of skills, working diligently with schools of skills, but also access to employability and entrepreneurship through teacher training, learner work experience, support and placement, and collaboration on career guidance and support. And these are the activities that are funded largely by the SETA. I can go to the next slide. Next slide. These slides are showing our focus areas, the strategic priorities that we are focusing on. You will see that most of them are referencing 2030, because in 2030, we have the SDGs, we have our National Development Plan, and these are the activities that we have identified to drive the work of the sector going forward. You'll see the review of education, white paper 6, strengthening education support services, placement of out-of-school children, strengthening early identification and intervention, training of teachers, advocacy, communication and information, strengthening institution, but also strengthening intersectoral collaboration with our sister departments. And this work is quite advanced. And I'm going to take you through the challenges and how we are mitigating them. And I must indicate that I think almost all the challenges that we have referenced here, there is something that we are doing about them. The misalignments, inadequacies that persist in the implementation, and we've started dealing with this with the review of education white paper 6, and I've indicated that the ministerial task team has already submitted their report to the minister. But there are still children who are out of school, and I've referenced the mobilization and placement of out-of-school children intervention and the work that continues to be done there. And the other issues around the early identification and intervention mechanisms. We are institutionalizing early identification and intervention. I must indicate that from this year, we are focusing in our oversight visits on the implementation of SIAS as an overarching framework to deal with issues around identification and intervention, but also our alignment with the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities to ensure that public ordinary schools are opened for learners with disabilities. You will see one of our areas of intervention is the designation of special schools as resource centers to support ordinary public schools in implementing inclusive education. I must indicate that I must reference what I said initially, that over 85,000 learners with disabilities are in public ordinary schools. But I must add and say that in the placement of out-of-school children with disabilities, we've also placed in public ordinary schools. And we're focusing on doing work with public ordinary schools to ensure that learners are able to attend schools in their communities. We have testimonies from parents. I think in one of our newsletters, we flag that, but we're also working on sharing some of the testimonies from parents and what parents are saying. For instance, I remember one case in Limpopo where the parent was saying, I was spending 700 Rand a month to take a child from a special school that is out of our community, and now I'm spending zero. But I think, Honorable Chairperson, the greatest challenge that the sector is facing is a shrinking fiscus, and this is impacting negatively on the work of the sector. But we continue to work with the National Treasury to review how budget cuts could be executed in a way that protects the right to a basic education. And proceed to the last slide. That's Honorable Chairperson. We are, as DBE, recommending that the Portfolio Committee discusses and considers the presentation on the provision of quality inclusive education to learners with disabilities. Through you, DDG, thank you very much. That's the end of the presentation. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Brown.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ngobo, and good morning to yourselves, honorable members. Good morning also to the DM, the minister, and the team from DBE. Apologies for earlier. I was struggling to log in because I'm on the road. So I will also be unable to switch on my camera because I'm on the road. I think, honorable members, these two presentations were very comprehensive. The last one was actually more comprehensive, and I do hope that it has given us an idea or a picture of the work that the department is doing within the LSNN space. We have, as we have undertaken our oversight visit, we have ensured that we also include schools of learners with special needs, but also we have been on a lookout for mainstream schools that are inclusive, that offer inclusive education. And of course, we have raised serious concerns based on our interaction with the principals of those schools, the parents in those schools, the various schools that we have visited. So the presentation looks very good on paper, but I do believe that the reality or the experience of our people ought to really align with what you've just presented. And if that is not the case, then we are continuously going to have these robust discussions about how we believe more needs to be done in this space. We are acknowledging, of course, that a lot of work has been done. We're acknowledging, of course, that as a country we've moved strides to ensure that there is inclusive education in our schools and that we leave no child behind. But there is a lot of concerns on the ground, especially as it relates to schools of learners with special needs. We don't have to rehash the engagements we've had with yourselves on specific schools that we had visited, where the concerns ranged from the infrastructure in those schools, that ranged from the devices, the assistive devices that school learners have to use, which constitutes learning and teaching material. Also how the young children within the ECD space are left behind. And that's one of the things that I do want to, perhaps before I give over to members to engage with the two presentation, to get a clarity from the department that with the Children's Amendment Act, having had that, and I think we appreciate the comprehensive update on the process, where it is, what has happened, what has the department done, and since they received the function and since this process was handed over to the department, and the scope and the nature of consultations that have taken place, the stakeholders that have participated in this consultations. I think we really appreciate that kind of an engagement. But of course, we are also interested in the contents of the amendments themselves. We want to hear how the issue of the standard and norms, of course, how they are going to really bring relief or even increase access, because the major question that we've been asking as we have been conducting the oversight in ECD centers is that How do we rationalize having no fee schools to ensure that there is more access, and as a recognition that comes out of a recognition that we need to ensure that every child has a right to education and can access education despite their socioeconomic conditions at home. However, when it comes to ECD centers, every parent is expected to make some form of a payment every month. And as a result, parents who are unable to make these payments decide to keep their children at home. We had, when we went to many ECD centers, when we conducted oversight, that actually their numbers in the beginning of the year are very low because parents do not have monies to pay the monthly fees. So they only start increasing around March, where parents believe now they would have at least saved something. And that means a child is at home for 3 months or 2 months and they miss out on the opportunity to learn. So we want to actually listen and hear how the amendments and how the new standard and norms for ECD is going to really respond to this question of rationalizing the funding model for ECD centers, either community ECD centers, especially those that are in your impoverished communities. Two, we'd really want to hear how this inclusive education, and in the Children's Act itself, how this inclusive education will then be funded, but be institutionalized and become part and parcel of the ECD delivery model. And we want to hear that. We know, and I've heard of some of the programs that you are busy with, the online training of ECD practitioners. But look, you can have an online training of an ECD practitioner, but the infrastructure of an ECD center or an ECD delivery site, if it doesn't, or if it is not conducive for a learner that is blind, a learner that is deaf, a learner with certain educational deficiencies, that will not assist. So the practitioners will have the training, but the infrastructure that they have to then deliver this education in might not be conducive. And in the Children's Amendment Act, we want to hear how your standard and norms are going to speak and respond to such anomalies. And I do believe, so I just wanted us to understand, that if we're in the same place, that you are still going to introduce the bill formally to Parliament, where then we can engage in the contents of the bill. What we were dealing with now is a progress update as to how far you are in terms of the preparation of the bill itself. And I think we've gotten that. I think that was very comprehensive. DM, do you want to come in on that one? Just the clarity. I think that will assist the discussions, because I want members to understand that we are not yet engaging the bill, because the bill is still going to be introduced formally to Parliament. We are currently engaging the process that the department has undertaken to prepare the bill, and we wanted to know how far they are in terms of finalizing that draft for a formal presentation to Parliament. I think that's where we are. I just wanted that confirmation from the DM so that it assists members in their engagements. DM? Okay, who's leading the team from DBE?
It's me, Honorable Chairperson Simone Gaya. And I can respond that yes, this is a progress report we have brought here today on the Children's Amendment Bill, and that we are now preparing to introduce it into Parliament. So it will still go through that process. Thank you.
Okay, now that's fine. Then we're on the same page. Okay, honorable members, I am now going to note hands for engagements with these presentations. I'll start with Honorable Kabanchaba, then we'll move to Honorable Mkize, Honorable Spies. Yeah, those are the three hands that I have. Honorable Makakula, Honorable Yordan as well. Those are the hands that I have. Let's start with Honorable Kabanchaba. Over to
Thank
you,
you
ma'am.
very much, Honorable Chairperson. Greeting to you, Chair, and honorable members in the platform, Minister DM, and all the department as a whole. All protocol is observed. Honorable Chair, with your permission, can you allow me to switch off this video because of the network problem where I am?
Omuhle nje ngunezini inkinga.
Not about Buhle, about the problem of the network here.
Zafuna iy'nkomo mina, I'm advertising you.
Chair,
Continue, ma'am.
okay, thank you, Chairperson. Chair, let me welcome the presentation of the department. Board presentation, Chairperson. Chairperson, indeed, they are a comprehensive presentation, as you are saying, even you, Chairperson, but I do have some question to the Mailana ECD Chair. The Department of Basic Education claims that ECD employees will benefit through improved access to support, subsidies, and appropriate facilities, and that the reforms would create employment opportunities for women and young adults. Yet, the national policy evaluation identifies low and insecure remuneration as a major structural problem in the ECD workforce. Now, Chair, my question is that what concrete mechanism will accompany the bill to improve the remuneration, qualification, career, progression, and working condition of ECD practitioners? And how will the department prevent increased regulatory requirement from being imposed on practitioners without providing the resource to meet them? I raise this question, Chairperson, because the women, they are the most affected by unemployment, and this was also revealed by the latest unemployment statistics. Chairperson, the issue of learners with disability, I also appreciate what the department has done. Indeed, there is a progress in this issue. But there are some areas, Chair, that the department need to be done. I'm saying this because where I came from Emashunga, esigodini seMashunga, kukhuphuka kuya phezulu, emachunini kuya le komajozi, ngikhuluma ke, I'm saying about the rural areas. Those areas, they don't have special schools. Their children, they are staying with them at their house, at their home, because it's too much to take the child to the urban areas where the schools they are. I'm requesting the department to consider the rural areas in KZN, as I'm talking about from Mashunga to go to Redismith, Winen, in Pomeroy. Those are the areas of the rural areas. So I appreciate the job being done by the department to make a progress about our learners, because they need to be treated like normal learners. Actually, I hear the department says where there are mainstream schools, we found that next to there is a special school, which is very good. We appreciate that, but there are many rural areas, they need special schools, again, especially at KZN. And I thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable Chaba, Honorable Mkize.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm not sure, Lord, hand, right? My hand is Lord. Chairperson, I think one must first thank the Minister and her team, the Deputy Minister, the DG, yourself, Chairperson, and committee members. But I want to thank the two presenters who presented to us. It shows that they had intention to really provide a comprehensive detail in terms of what they are struggling with. And one is pleased because it shows that even though the government at a GNU level is failing, but we still have the professionals with technical abilities to plan and lead key objectives of the department on the ground. I think at a technical level, they really showed that they are professionals and they are experts in their field. If you look at the content and how it was articulated for us to understand what the department is busy with. Just to say salute to the professionals on that one. One must give positive feedback when it's due. The presentation is showing that they really thoroughly prepared and they know what they're actually intending to do. Only if they could be led by the current government, they will be able to execute exactly what they are telling us. Starting with the Children's Amendment Bill of 2026, Chairperson, I see that it, just a moment, Chairperson. Thank you very much. It shows that it speaks to reduction of red tape, overlap, misalignment, exclusion, which is good. But my only concern, Chairperson, is whether the department has done a proper change control plan. Because moving from DSD to DPE, the function is quite a very mountainous project. So many people, when they do change, they do it from authority point of view, but I don't know, Uti, it should also happen a technical point of view, where there's proper assessment and feasibility assessment to see if the proposed change is feasible and what challenges will be encountered on the way, and thus what needs to be done to manage the challenges as you change. Change control plan is very important. Fine, I did pick up some pieces here and there when the presentation was there, but the change control plan has to be a specific plan focusing on challenges and activities that will be conducted to make sure that the change itself doesn't cause more chaos, havoc, and regress the progress that has already been made. So it's important to understand, because right now, Chair, we're already struggling with coordination between the departments of government. This government is really failing, not government in this case, the professionals themselves. They're really failing to coordinate effort from various sister departments, They end up working silotic, at the end of the day, things don't happen. So if you change from DST to DPE, while some functions will still rest with DST, how would you then technically coordinate, as we are struggling with coordination now, to make sure that the change is positive, is not negative? What it means in practical terms, how to deal with issues of staffing. Are you going to have now the social workers employed under DPE or to remain under TSD for services that need social workers, the nurses and all that? Or you'll have a different coordination plan? Budget-wise, I did see some budget indications and all that. I was quite pleased to see they've thought to that level. And we also need to know about issues of professional development, because as you change from one side to another side, you also take a responsibility to do professional development of staffing as they change. The other issues I want to raise, Chair, even though I've lost confidence in terms of asking questions to the department, because the answers always they do not give substance of what happened and what will happen. It's a response anyway. We need to take it and move on with it, vague as it may be. So the question I'll ask, Chairperson, what is the case? What happens in the case where such rights, looking at the frameworks of human rights and all that, when such rights are infringed through non-availability and infrastructure dilapidation, what remedial action plan is in place? Because in many areas, as Mamkiza said, like rural communities, some of such infrastructure has been there but has dilapidated. Thus, the right to education is infringed. So what is the remedial plan there? What is a known baseline showing the number of required special schools in farms, township, and rural communities? Does the department know how many special schools are required in those communities? Because they're not there. And Mamkis has already made this point as well. Why comparing the 2002 versus 2026 data in your presentation? Why not the 2017 against 2026, for example? Because we know this M&E people tendency, Chairperson. When they want to mine positive indicators or positive outcomes, they will push data back to 1652 when Jan van Riebeeck arrived. Because they're trying to avoid denying performance in the past 5-10 years. So when I saw this 2 data compared with 2026, I knew exactly. Here, they're trying to run away from the fact that in the past 7 years of President Ramaphosa's administration, no progress that has been made. So they had to go dig back during the Zuma Mbeki times to have numbers to show some data. And that's not good practice, M&E people from the department. Don't lie to us. If we are not performing in the recent 10 years, tell us that. Don't give us positive indications of work that was done before I had my last born, who is 22 years old now. What could be the main reason for the entire nation to only have 30 full service schools, Chairperson, and how many of them are well equipped and fully functional? It is a very important question to ask, Chairperson. I can tell you in my own community, Mandeni, we have one of the full service schools called Makambini Primary. The infrastructure is not modified. There's no assistive learning equipment. The teachers are not trained. It's one of 30 available in the country. It is in my community, Mandeni. Go to Makambini. It's Makambini Primary. So this state is not substantive, therefore, Chair. We need to really look at this and see, out of this small amount, how many of them are fully functional, well modified and ready, assisting actually with the learners. Because this thing of the special schools, Chairperson, we know that they were there in trying to broaden the capacity of the learning institutions so they are able to comprehensively respond to learning the learners' needs in the communities, particularly in rural communities where you will not have special school, for example. But that alone could be exposing them to lack of support, because you will record them as people who are now enrolled in a special school, in a full service school, while the same full service school is not equipped. So we are exposing them, we are registering them under people who are receiving proper care from proper facility, while actually the facility is not ready to do that. Has the department established the gap of educators, support staff, technical, special skills sets, and trainings required to fully capacitate the special schools in or the full service schools in rural, farm, and township communities? If yes, by when such report will be made available? Because if you don't work on creating proper baselines, you only dictated by the size of the budget for your planning, we are really giving us problems. Even though you are not giving money, we know this government is not giving you funds, but still be able to indicate how many people need such special schools and full service schools. Be able to tell us that. What are the gaps in the rural communities and farm communities, most especially because that's where actually neglect by this government is more prevalent. Why 85,000 learners are still attending the ordinary public schools? And if this number accounts for each and every disabled learner attending an ordinary school? Have you verified the data? Have you checked in communities how many of the learners with special needs are not even enrolled in school? So that this 85,000 is not a gross underestimation of the situation that we should be dealing with. How many learners require and qualify to receive the LSPID grant on top of the 9,158 currently receiving it? The baseline there, that's what I'm talking about. Do you know this or not? Or you can only report to those you give, but not those who are still desperate and vulnerable in communities. Lastly, Chair, how come GP has more disabled learners, almost 2 times bigger than KZN, which is the biggest PED in South Africa? It doesn't make sense, Chair. The bigger province has smaller learners with special needs, but the smaller province has bigger. To me, it says this is a data issue, this one. It means KZN has not done proper data collection because it cannot be under it cannot be under Gauteng. It doesn't make sense to me. There's some anomaly there we need to pick. But it suggests to me it's issues of data collection and verification. While there are fewer special schools in KZN, while there are close to 34,000 learners known to be attending the ordinary schools, it goes back to the same point I made earlier. Why we have fewer special schools while we've got more learners who are attending normal schools. And those 34,000 learners, they're actually not being serviced right now. Actually, they're being underprivileged by this government. It is concerning. Lastly, what makes provinces like Limpopo, Northwest, and Northern Cape to show the smallest numbers of learners with disabilities? Is it because disabled people do not like to stay in Limpopo, Northwest, and Northern Cape, or there's no proper data collection or proper identification of such learners? To me, it symbolizes despondency, neglect. There's no way that these provinces, particularly, they'll have very smaller numbers. To me, it says we have not looked out for them and we have not enrolled them. I'm sorry for expanding, Chair. I think my spirit is very down today.
You are always expanding, Honorable Mkhize. In fact, we
Fighting for the people, Chair.
would want you to expand on your allegations of a government failing.
It's a fact, Chairperson.
Appreciate those allegations because facts must be accompanied by evidence. I think it's actually a subject for debate because this government is cleaning up a lot of mess of a certain administration, under a certain president. So
Order,
it's
Chairperson, order.
it's a serious discussion. It's a serious point of debate. Is it on me, Honorable Mkhize? Is it an order on me?
Yeah, on you, Chairperson, but let it pass.
Okay. Next, it was Honorable Law. Was it Honorable Law? Actually, no. It was not Honorable.
This is Honorable Space.
Honorable
Thank you,
Space.
Chair.
It was Honorable Space, yes. I just see
Thank-
his hand now because he didn't have his hand up, actually.
I'm the last chair. Sorry. My gadget was like the one of Mom Kidding.
Okay. Honorable Space.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. And thank you very much for the presentations. And I would like to echo Honorable Mkhize in the quality of presentation that we have received from the officials from DBE. And so please, Chair, also before I move to my question, just allow me to recognize the significance of this bill having reached this stage. And therefore, I want to congratulate the Minister, the Deputy Minister, and the officials within the department who have contributed to bringing the bill to this point of cabinet approval and preparation for introduction to Parliament. And at the same time, Chair, obviously recognizing that the important parliamentary legislative process still lies ahead. And I think it's particularly significant because I know that ECD reform speaks directly to one of the minister's key priorities, which is expanding access to quality early childhood development, particularly for vulnerable children. So I will then move over to my questions, Chairperson. I would like to start with the issue around funding, because within the presentation, it explicitly states that the funding of ECD's programs will remain discretionary rather than mandatory. And I need to understand how confident the department is that we will not simply move from a registration barrier to a funding barrier, where centers become registered but remain financially unable to provide quality ECT services. And I want to know if the DBE have an estimate of how many additional ECT programs could qualify for registration under the new system, compared to how many where the government will realistically be able to fund. Chair, in terms of rural communities, I would like to know how this bill will change the reality for an informal home-based or community ECD program in your rural or lower income communities that really currently struggles to comply with infrastructure, municipal registration requirements. One of the key concerns that has also been highlighted, Chair, we know the current state of local government, and the hope is obviously that after elections things might go better. But municipalities could actually become the new bottleneck, because the department clearly identifies the weak municipal implementation as a huge risk. So if we as national government streamlined registrations, but individual municipalities continue to apply, for instance, inconsistent zoning, environmental health or bylaw requirements that are not adhered to, how will the bill prevent municipalities from simply becoming the next regulatory bottleneck? And then I think it's Dr. Kotzer. Dr. Kotzer made a particular reference, and I think it was slide 4, where mention was made of the red tape that is a challenge. And I would like to understand from the department. It acknowledges that she said in a presentation that they acknowledge that the current system creates red tape, which I believe is unnecessary, through 2 registration processes and 2 sets of norms and standards. And Chair, that the consequences is not merely the fact that it's administratively inefficient. It can actually lock vulnerable children out of funding and early learning opportunities. And I would like to understand from this how this bill will ensure that in removing the red tape, we create a system of registration that is genuinely simpler, it is faster for ECD providers, but also particularly small community-based and informal providers, not compromising the health and the safety and the quality standards that protect children. And I think, Chair, importantly, is what improvements can we maybe look at, or the department possibly look at, that will ensure that there will be clear targets for reducing the registration turnout times and increasing the number of currently unregistered ECD programs. that successfully enter the formal system. Then, Chair, I would also like to maybe move on to the presentation on the inclusive education part. And Chair, just in my own oversight and visits to special schools, facilities, particularly caring for children under the age of 5 um, with learning disabilities. Um, what has concerned me is that there's an apparent gap that exists between the support that might exist on paper and what is actually reaching facilities on the ground. And I think presenters also, I think two of the presenters touched on that. Um, many of these small community-based facilities are really struggling, Chair, with registration requirements. They're struggling with compliance, with funding, and just basic operational sustainability. And in some instances, facilities even close, not necessarily because there is no demand, because there is, but because they simply cannot navigate or they cannot afford the system. And I want to understand what is the possible practical intervention that exists or can maybe be established and in terms of support that the department can possibly provide to help these ECT facilities become compliant and sustainable, rather than just allowing registration requirements and red tape to push them out of the system. And then further to that, and if there are such support programs that maybe already exists, how are they being communicated to such ECD practitioners at community level? Because my concern, from what I've observed, is that many of the people running these facilities either do not know what assistance is available or do not know how to access it. And surely, Chair, the objective should not simply be to regulate these ECT facilities, but to help them cross the bridge from informality to compliance. Because when one ECD facility closes, ultimately it's the child who loses access. And then, Chair, in terms of, I think it was the second presenter's slide towards the end, a few things that I've noticed under the observations and the progress that I would maybe just like to highlight, Chair, is that um, accountability for uneven implementation, if specifically when it comes to the MTT. When or if the MTT has concluded that implementation of the White Paper 6 remains uneven and under-resourced, I want to understand, have the department identified precisely which provinces and districts are falling furthest behind, and why they are falling behind? And I've seen there was an indication of the provinces and the progress, but one wants to understand why are they falling behind and what are the measures we can put in place to correct this. And then can we furthermore, the report also makes a very serious observation. It says that the current policy architecture may inadvertently continue to sustain segregation. So I want to understand, Chair, and maybe I've missed that, but what specifically within the current system is producing that segregation? And what concrete policy or regulatory changes does the department think they can do or make to address this, or they intend making to address it? And in my last question, Chair, mine is on under-resourcing. If under-resourcing is one of the central reasons that White Paper 6 has not been fully realized, as the DBE quantified the actual funding, specialist personnel, infrastructure gaps required to make inclusive education work. Because without that costing, how can there be a determination whether we are dealing with an implementation failure or simply an inclusion policy that has never been adequately funded. I have a number of other questions, Chair, which arises from the partnership with NGOs, universities and foundations and the private sector. I would rather give my colleagues an opportunity because there is quite a number, but at this point, I think I should stop there. Thank you for the opportunity, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable Spies. Honorable, you're done.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair. Let me take this opportunity to greet the honorable members of the Portfolio Committee and the delegation from the DBE and importantly also the Honorable Minister and Deputy Minister. Honorable Chair, it's quite extraordinary to have young children, and I think you would likely relate, and so would other members in the committee, to have young children at this time when early learning is really a central priority to the Portfolio Committee, and it's at the center of government's priorities for education, repeatedly emphasizing expanding access to quality early childhood development and foundational learning being central to the start of a learner's academic journey and really their success in further stages of their lives. Honorable Chair, this bill is advocating for less red tape, clear accountability, earlier intervention, better access and more support for vulnerable children. Also including greater parental choice when it comes to the needs of children. I welcome conditional registration of ECD centers and the massive effort that's gone into registering early childhood development centers, because this says that if a center is operating, recognition is given to it rather than creating barriers for these centers in terms of providing access to learners. And this really speaks to putting the needs of the learner above all else. Honorable Chair, my question to the department with regards to this is what support will be provided to centers that receive conditional registration so that it becomes a genuine pathway to compliance rather than only a temporary status? Then, Chair, I'd also like to welcome the cooperative approach with local government that has been mentioned, and I assume that this is a measure of assurance that the new ECD norms and standards do not unintentionally close informal or rural programs, that government actually becomes closer to these centers at a ground level and thereby reduce red tape that would result in these centers closing down, as Honorable Spies had mentioned. I support bringing children into the system and not pushing centers out of it. And I'd really like to commend the department in the work that's being done to get legislation to this point. Chair, further than that, I also welcome the strengthened emphasis on protection of children. But that said, children's rights are only meaningful if the state has the capacity, the funding, and the institutional accountability to deliver safety. And with this bill establishing a stronger role for the for a registrar of the National Child Protection Register and changing the way that information on the register is administered, I therefore question what mechanisms are being introduced to ensure that the National Child Protection Register is accurate, regularly updated, and subject to effective review and appeal procedures, and what resources have been allocated to the registrar. Chair, then also on a more practical level, I'd like to understand who has access to the Child Protection Register. In other words, if I have an ECD center and I'd like to vet my employees against the register, what are the steps that would need to be taken to be able to do that? Is there open access from the public, or how does that work? How long does the application process to vet someone take, and what are the steps involved in the whole process? And then perhaps the department can also give us some data on how many employers in the country since the start of the year have actually checked women and men against the register in the last year, particularly in the education sector, of course, teachers, coaches, new or current employees, male and female, drivers, groundsmen, general staff that have access to children. And I'd like to actually receive the numbers for this so that we can understand whether vetting against the National Child Protection Register is accurate and whether it does take place in a sufficient manner. Then, Chair, with regards to children's privacy, what systems, budget, and accountability mechanisms will ensure that protection actually does happen? And what will define who has access to the personal information of children? So we know that according to legislation, there are already a host of people who would have access to the personal information of a child. But what actually defines who these people and institutions are, and what is the extent of their access to a child's information? Then when it comes to special education, Honorable Chair, I support an inclusive education system. As the Minister had mentioned, a learner with disability should have access regardless of the circumstances they find themselves in. They should have access to appropriate teachers, curriculums, specialist support, assistive technology, transport, and assessment accommodations that are necessary for them to participate meaningfully in their development and in their schooling. Equality of opportunity means also that their geographical location or their disability should not determine the quality of education they receive. And so, Honorable Chair, one of the key issues I think that we are faced with in the portfolio committee, and that people actually often query with us, is the issue of placement in schools that provide services for learners with special education needs. Can the department tell us how many learners are currently waiting for placement per province as at the start of the 2026 academic year? So we'd like to hear a breakdown of learners awaiting placement in each and every province. In doing so, could the department indicate the number of learners awaiting placement in each province, as I've asked, and distinguish between those requiring placement in special schools and those requiring placement in ordinary public schools? And if a learner has been assessed as requiring specialized education, but the nearest special school has no space, what is the legally enforceable obligation on the province to provide an appropriate alternative? How many school-aged children with disabilities are currently not enrolled? How many ordinary schools have functioning LSEN support capacity? How does the department determine when a learner's needs are best met in a mainstream, full service or special school? And what safeguards prevent inclusion from becoming placement without adequate support? In other words, if a learner has needs for special education but is placed in an ordinary school, are they receiving the sufficient support that's required for them to succeed academically? How many ordinary schools currently have the required infrastructure, trained personnel, assistive technology, and support structures to accommodate learners with significant disabilities? Then with regards to specialist support, Honourable Chair, what's the current learner to specialist ratio for occupational therapists, speech therapists, psychologists, and learning support specialists in each province? And what's the department's target ratio? In other words, what is currently there and what is required? Then when it comes to assessment, accommodations, and concession, what are the provincial approval rates and turnaround times for this? And then what efforts will be undertaken by the department and the minister to reconsider inclusion of orientation and mobility training for blind learners and South African Sign Language for deaf learners in the LSEN curriculum? And so just as the access to language and to reading for meaning is important for learners for their future schooling years. For learners with special education needs, being able to orientate and navigate themselves in their schooling environment and in their home environment and generally their lives, as well as language for learners that are deaf, being a prerequisite for them to conduct any further learning. What is the department doing to assist in learners obtaining those skills in order for them to have greater success in reaching their potential in later years of schooling? Then, Chair, per province, how many LSEN schools are currently in construction, or what projects are being planned and for how long? In other words, when did these projects start and at what cost to these provinces have these projects been undertaken? Then lastly, Chair, with regards to learner-teacher support material, in our oversight that we've conducted in several provinces, schools are saying learner-teacher support material does not speak to what learners need in special education. What is the department's response to this? How are needs assessment done for what learner-teacher support material is provided? And what is the department's plans to reconsider the needs that learners with special education needs have in terms of this? For example, when we look at Braille materials, I think it was in Mpumalanga that we encountered a school that mentioned Braille printing can only be done by one supplier or two suppliers in the Western Cape, making those materials incredibly hard to come by, meaning that blind learners actually have a disadvantage that is outside of their control. Thank you very much, Honourable Chair, for the opportunity. I therefore close my questions.
Thank you, Honorable Yodan. Honorable Magakula.
Good morning, Chairperson and everybody. Please take note that I'm not well, but I'll continue with my questions. I'll open the video just to confirm that it's me. It's not somebody else, and close it. Chair, I welcome the presentation, both of them also. We are told that 10 billion in the 2025-26 MTEF was the first step towards progressively increasing ECT funding. However, persistent underfunding, inadequate subsidy levels, and major gaps in coverage remain. Recognizing that the funding challenges are omnipresent, in line with this bill, has the department planned and costed a multi-year funding plan for ECT programs, given that we have the universal access goal to attain by 2030? If so, has the Treasury and other stakeholders been engaged so that we indeed close the existing gaps and attain the 2030 objectives? and implementation of inclusive education on slide 5.1. It is unacceptable that the system continues to be inundated with cases of late identification, withstanding the delayed identification of developmental barriers can result in learning backlogs, repetition, and increased dropout. What concrete mechanism are being put in place to ensure that early identification become a routine service across all ECT centers rather than remaining a pilot or project-based intervention? Can the department share with the citizens of our country the baseline of learners in the system that have been identified and channeled properly, and those that have not been channeled accordingly, particularly in provinces and communities where specialist services are already limited? On slide 9.1 in the presentation, it is highlighted that there are contractors that encounter challenges in fulfilling their contractual obligations. Therefore, what consequences are imposed on implementing agents and within agreed deadline? And which specific projects have been affected by this, and how have learners been shielded from academic disturbances? And lastly, with 6,125 infrastructure projects in the pipeline, how is the department prioritizing special and full service schools to ensure that learners with disability received accessible infrastructure as an agent requirement rather than competing with general infrastructure needs? And what measurable targets will demonstrate that this backlog is being reduced? And what are the set timelines for beefing up capacity in schools' infrastructure delivery? I thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Makakula. Honorable Law.
Thank you very much, Chair. Let me also not waste time. I think, Chair, the presentation has shown us that the special schools enrollment growing from 64,000 to 1,021 and 459 learners, alongside an increase of 832 full service schools. Can maybe the department confirm whether this reflects a shift towards genuine inclusion in ordinary schools or continued reliance on separate systems, given the State South Africa reported education participation for children living with disabilities are remaining close to 10% below than that of children without disabilities as recently as 2022-2024? So that's my first question. And Chair, I think quite enormous and important is that when I look onto the presentation, as I made the opening in terms of highlighting the issues, it is well decorated, but the challenges on the ground and the communities are not enjoying the services that have been put on paper, and it's quite concerning if we must highlight such, because if we are still using white paper, it becomes quite concerning. Why are we still using white paper? It should be quite a concern, because we should be migrating and transiting properly, because interventions are not helping the poor, the poorest as expected, because we giving the privileges more opportunities, and we're not much more bringing progress. Having to look onto the presentation, and I want to know, why are there no special schools in rural areas specifically, so that we're able to resonate and respond to the issues of import of that are there for our schools? And I think it is quite important also, Chair, for the department to give us progress in the establishment of the full service schools as per the province, and how many special schools are servicing as per the resource centers. from the department so that we're able to be inclined and enormous on key issues. And I'll also want to chip into where I saw in the presentation there was the record of 7,513 learners where special care centers recorded in special care centers, only 1,258 were placed over 4 years. And roughly it gives us 16.7%, leaving 6,255 uncounted. Can the department maybe provide a reconciled case level to register of these children disaggregated by age, support need and reason for non-placement, and the deadline by which every child on that register will have a placement pathway? Can we get that? And the other part that I want to raise, Chair, is the LSPIT grant reports, where only 2,097 of 2,660 targeted children are receiving therapeutic services with Free State, KwaZulu-Natal, Northern Cape, and NatWest, all significantly under target, while several provinces report expenditure that is way above 100% of transfers. Can also the department explain the mismatch between the high spending and missed therapy targets and confirm the financing sources for over expenditure so that we're able to clarify and understand what therefore give us the delay? We see there's only a 3% of the grant, of the LSP PID grant, that is located to the class assistants and the caregivers against the 65% for the intermediate teams and grant management. Does the department consider this adequate for learners who require continuous personal assistance? And will a costed per learner funding model be developed so that we are able to know, Chair? The teaching training figures that are reported in terms of attendance is 19,321 teachers trained in 25-26 financially, but not competency because, Chair, classroom implementation or learner impact and contained unreconciled discrepancies, including contradictory SALs training figures between slides that we have seen in the presentation must be clarified. So can the department also commit to report competency and classroom outcomes rather than attendance? Because what we get is attendance, not what we get. So can we be clear in terms of the reporting? The reporting should be competency and classroom outcomes rather than the attendance numbers going forward. NSC accommodation figures show us that there are extraordinary swings, whereby Gauteng from 58 to 3,049 accommodations year on year, your KZN from 102 to 48 without application, approval, refusal, and appeal data. How can the committee be confident that these figures reflect equitable access rather than inconsistent adjudication or data capture? Can we get clarity on that one also? Last two questions, Chair, that I would want to pose is also the scholar transport has reached 88% as per the national target, with KwaZulu-Natal reaching just 48% of the targeted learners. Now, following the report, the findings of the SAHRCs, finding of the systematic scholar transport failures Northwest, including inadequate accommodation for learners with disabilities. What correct timeline has been the department set and who's accountable for this? And are there consequence management that has been put forward, given the findings that were put forward by January 2026, so that we're able to measure? Are we just having to have talk shows? Or are we going to have to see people having to be accountable for the deeds that they are not doing? Because we work with performance management and we work with targets that are aligned to our performance contracts. And the performance contract gives liberty to those who are superior to be able to take action for those who are not able to deliver. Because I think it's gone are the days that when we come to the committee, we don't seek to get the consequence management column where the department is telling us to say failure for us not to get the things done as per what we have said in our plannings. Even if it's not about fiscal constraints and departmental budgets, it should be about consequence management, because people must perform. They must indeed make sure that they reflect the realities, because if we can come here, make good presentations, but when you go back to our constituencies, the realities goes back to zero. It goes back to zero by virtue of us not having to do our work as expected. So, lastly, Chair, the ministerial task team's review of the White Paper 6 reportedly found implementation under-resourced and even and structurally sustaining segregation. Will the department table the full report and it's evidence-based, and the government's response to this committee, and by when, so that we're able to have a time frame, so that we can be able to measure our work, and we are not repetitive, because it is quite also boring and concerning if we are going to be repetitive on issues that we think we can be put abreast with, and we can see progress on those particular issues. For us, when we come, we are able to further discuss things that are quite progressive and are responsive to the call that the president has made in SONA on us making sure that the curricula is quite responsive to the current demand of the economy. The global tensions have made to us aware as we need to plan much more on our education, and we are still stumbling in between the two chairs. So, Chair, I wish to submit. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Low. There are questions that have been sent to us by Honorable Mgadi, who says that she's struggling with network. I have tasked Mr. Brown to submit those questions, compile those questions, send them to the department for written responses. I went through the questions, and 80% of the questions have already been asked by other members. So it will just be for the sake of those questions that have not been responded to. I'm going to hand over now to the department for responses. I don't know who's going to start. DM, Ms. Gia.
Okay, may I start and then I'll hand over to the team.
Apologies, Minister. I kept on saying DM. Because I was not here when you started, I thought you were not in the meeting. Apologies.
No problem. No problem at all. I just thought it would be useful, perhaps, Chairperson, to just perhaps start from the beginning, because I think there's when I say start from the beginning, there's been a number of questions that have been asked by the members, and I think maybe some of them may be answered quite easily. So one of there are a few questions that have been asked about the progress, for instance, on registration and our view to what, how are we making sure that we are meeting our targets in particular. So I think firstly, the understanding that the move for the function to DBE was done a couple of years ago, and the problem that we have is that the issue is that we the sector in itself is not one that is properly has been organized. So let me just maybe perhaps go through some of the questions that have come up. So Honorable Aban Chaba has asked about the questions around rural access to learners with special disability, particularly in KwaZulu Natal. And I must say, just upfront, Chairperson, that our LSEN, the learners with special education needs, of course, what we really would want is we would want to mainstream a lot of learners with special education needs into our main schools. But obviously, for some reasons, some learners would require to be in specialized care that have access to therapists and the like. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to make sure that when schools that are built, they are built so that they have ramps on them, so that when, for instance, a child that is wheelchair bound, there's no reason for them to go to necessarily a specialized school. They can very well and succeed in a mainstream school. So I agree with Honorable Aban Jabba that geography must not determine the learner's access to education at all. Inclusive education is not just a term that we must just use willy-nilly. We must be truly inclusive. And in fact, the MTT talks a lot about this. They spend a great deal of time talking about how do we make sure our schools are more inclusive than they currently are, so that we are not simply saying simply because a child is mildly autistic or a child maybe wheelchair bound that they necessarily need to go to a different school. We must mainstream our schools to make them a lot more inclusive, and I think that is a big takeaway for us from the MTT's work, and that is what we also make sure that we do, and we do a better job of that. And I also just want to also and also acknowledge the fact that children with disabilities that are staying at home because there isn't provision for schools with special needs is absolutely unacceptable. And I think it's an area that for us requires a great deal of attention. I think it was in this committee where I was saying that it's really important for us to spend quite a bit of time looking at how do we resource this particular area of inclusive education so that no child can and should be remaining at home simply because the support that they need is too far away. We need to invest, we need to build more, we need to make schools a lot more accessible. And so I'll just ask the department to respond specifically on the KZN rural provision. And then Honorable Mkhize has asked about data integrity and identification of access, and he's asked about the unmet demand. I think Honorable Mkhize does say this quite a bit, and I think it's important that um, reliable data and and good data are absolutely fundamental in the work that we do, because we can't support children whom the system has failed to identify. And so a lot of the challenges that the honorable member is talking about don't just emerge just now. In fact, when I think it was Honorable Lowe in his later inputs saying, talking about the white paper. The work on the white paper started back in 2001, and it has been a long period of work and a large amount of work that has gone into updating that white paper. Now we're at a point where the white paper is complete, but at the end of the day, what we need to do is we need to make sure that it's costed, because honorable members, it doesn't help if we only just have a document that identifies the problem. Some members were saying that what looks good on paper in our presentations is not reflected on the ground, and I want to echo that, to say that's why we've got to cost the work that needs to be done, and the work that needs to be done, it needs to be costed so we can know what are the immediate steps, what are the intermediate steps, and what are the longer term steps. And that's why now the Education and Training Council is looking at the work that the Ministerial Task Team did, and it's putting some cost to it so that we can see what can we do immediately, and what can we do in 2 years' time, and what can we do in a longer term time. So I just want to just to assure the members that we are working with that. Then Honorable speaks about under resourcing. I want under resourcing, and I want to agree. We have breached about almost 300 million in this work, and we would want to do more. We would want to invest a lot more in this work, because ultimately, members, it is costly work to make ordinary schools that were not built with children with special education needs in mind. Adaptable is work that we need to do. And of course, one of the things that we also need to do is to make sure that we are building facilities for children with severe education needs that are fully equipped with, as I said, the necessary therapists, the necessary people that are there that need to be staffed. And so, I think I welcome the question. The review must also distinguish clearly between the policy design failures, implementation failures, and the funding constraints. And that is what I'm trying to explain, I think, with the white paper, to say, there are reforms that the MTT has proposed, However, the truth of the matter is we have to make sure that it is costed so that we can make sure that wherever we can, we can just begin with that work. But I think I want to just make this point. If we are serious about inclusion, we have to be equally serious about understanding what it costs to deliver it. Because we can come here, honorable members, and we can say, here's the white paper, these are the things that it says. But then if we are not if we are simply saying that and then we're not delivering, a very fair question you may ask us in 6 months time is to say, how far are you with delivering on the things that you said you would? So I think the costing becomes extremely important. Then Honorable Jordan is asking about early support, infrastructure and appropriate LTSM, and essentially what are we doing to support early learning. She also asked about the provincial breakdown of LSAN schools and raises questions about LTSM that does not always meet the learner's actual needs. I think early, just on that, honorable member, early identification and appropriate support must happen as early as possible. This is why we work quite closely with the Department of Health, so that we can ensure that the screening that takes place either in grade R, and now we're wanting to do that and extend that even in ECD. So because we believe that early detection allows for early support or even corrective measures. And so intervention can't just wait until the learners are struggling or they're struggling late in schools. We have to make sure that we detect those problems because sometimes learners are partially deaf and all that they really needed to be able to thrive in school is a device that would allow them to hear. And so that's why I think it's absolutely important that we um we we identify early things like braille procurement and all of those things. Inclusion means more than just placing a learner in a classroom. It means ensuring that the learner has the language, the material, and the support that they need. Then Honorable Makakula asked about identification infrastructure delivery. I think what is quite important, and she asked about infrastructure projects in the pipeline and how those are doing. I think accountability, honorable members, must extend beyond just money being allocated. Projects must translate into accessible schools and actual improvements. And so I asked the department to come in on the particular projects that Honorable Makakula was asked. And I think that also it's just going to be important that we have some particular things there. Then Honorable Low asked very important questions about scholar transport accountability and white paper 6. I agree, Honorable Low, that delivery must be measured by what changes the learners on the ground and not the presentations, not the presentations that we make to you. And that's why I'm always so appreciative when the committee actually goes on oversight visits and I get written reports to the office that say, please, can you respond to this? In fact, a success story that came from your very oversight visits was an oversight visit you did in Limpopo, where we managed to get that school now rectified because of the reports that we get from you. So it's not a luxury, and it's something that we do appreciate. And so just on the white paper, I can understand the frustration, but as I indicated, this has been work that has been done since 2001. And so now it is finally done and we are prioritizing it. But I don't just want to present a policy document, excuse me. I don't just want to present a policy document that gathers dust, but what we want to do is we want to make sure that that paper is costed and we can come to you with tight timelines that say exactly when we will do what by when. And then I'll just ask the department to speak on the scholar transport corrective action. Thank you very much, Chairperson. Ms. Gare, are there things that I missed that I could expand that you could expand on?
Yes, Minister, there are some few things that I think we can augment the report on. I think that I'll ask Yanli to get into the technical information around just what the Children's Act will will achieve. I think there might have been some confusion around what the children's amendment bill from the side of DSD covers and what we are covering in our chapters that are in the act, in the bill. And then there are some other technical information that you can also augment what you have explained around red tape and so on. So Yaneli, if you could please come in on those technical aspects.
Thank you, Ms. Gaia. Thank you, Minister and honourable members. And thank you for the engagement. It was a very encouraging engagement. I think there's a couple of essential questions that I think were so helpful just for us to think through, but also respond to. I think that the question asked by the chairperson on how will this bill help us to increase access to quality ECD, specifically for the most vulnerable, and I think this links to a lot to what the minister also spoke about red tape is, the bill was historically written for contexts that are not where the majority of our vulnerable children sit. And that has created this exclusionary space where often the norms and standards are set way beyond what is achievable for any ECD program in a rural or low-income community. And that has created a poverty trap where ECD programs can't get registered, and it's only once an ECD program is conditionally or fully registered that they can be funded by government. So the poverty trap means that they can't meet the norms and standards because they are not contextually relevant. They are set for suburban communities, and therefore they can't access funding. And that is one of the key things that we're trying to overcome with this bill is how do we take this a very strong developmental approach of taking an ECD program where they are and taking them and supporting them to meet their norms and standards, because health and safety is important, but we have to have that contextually relevant. So one of the key initiatives that this bill is introducing is differentiating between different ECD modalities, understanding that community-based sites, play groups, toy libraries, mobile ECD programs, all those modalities can play a very important role in providing services to children in the most vulnerable areas. And I think what we are seeing from data such as Thrive by 5 and the early learning outcome measures is that the various modalities can still deliver the same child outcomes. And for that reason, we feel it's important to differentiate between different modalities, but then set norms and standards that's contextually relevant to those modalities so that it's much easier for those modalities to get registered, conditionally registered, and therefore subsidized. I think in terms of inclusive early childhood development programs, there was a question on that as well. And I really appreciated the minister's very pragmatic response on inclusivity in general. But that is also the approach that we want to take in early childhood development, is how do we ensure that all children can participate in early learning programs, regardless of, firstly, their vulnerability, but also regardless of any developmental delays. And then recognizing that early childhood as a period in life is where the brain is still really malleable. So if we can do early identification of developmental delays, we can still catch children before these developmental delays become learning barriers. And that is really, really important. So we've recently partnered with a technical partner, the Children's Institute, on saying, how do we take an ecosystem approach to early identification, support, and then community support around early learning programs so that we can quickly understand when a child has developmental delays, and we can connect them with the right support to either help them catch up so that the developmental delay doesn't turn into a learning barrier, or we can provide them with the support they require so that as they transition from early childhood development into schooling, they have that support required already. So we'll be developing an ecosystem approach in collaboration with the Department of Health and Social Development, knowing that in the early childhood space, that's critically important, is this deep integration between the different government departments. I think there was a question on practitioner conditions of service and a career pathway. And I think it's always really important to understand that ECD programs are, the majority of them, more than 95% of them, are independent providers. They're micro enterprises where they are either the sole it's a micro enterprise with one employer, or it's the micro enterprise that employs other ECD programs. So we need to be very careful on what are we allowed to do as government? What are we not allowed to do? But the key thing that this bill again will do is it will enable us as government to provide support to ECD programs, pre-registration support, as the bill calls it. So it enables us to support ECD programs even before they are registered. But more than that, it will also enable us to then expand access to the subsidy so that more and more ECD programs can access the subsidy. And through increasing progressively the subsidy value over time in collaboration with National Treasury, we can ensure that these micro enterprises then have sufficient funding to provide much more I think reasonable remuneration to our practitioners, because I completely agree with the honourable member. It is the women in our communities who are the heroes in our country, and we need to recognise them. And the department has recently approved the Human Resource Development Plan, which is positioning and providing flexible career pathways for practitioners, enabling recognition of prior learning, but very importantly, recognising just the important role that these practitioners play, and recognizing them for the skills that they have. So with regard to, I think the minister clarified that the function shift has happened in 2022. So the function shift has been completed. And a lot of the work we're now doing is how do we strengthen this function? How do we ensure that we've got strengthened, transparent and accountable government systems in place to enable early childhood development as a sector to flourish? I think there was also many really, really helpful comments by Honourable Space on, I think the first one is just what's our targets for registration, and how do we move from funding not being a barrier, and we're in a very fortunate position for the first time ever in South Africa where we've got more funding for this financial year and for next financial year than we have a pipeline to spend. And that is why this mass registration drive is so critical to what we're doing. Is for by the end of this financial year, we need to have another 4,000 ECD programs registered, additional to currently registered ECD programs, so that when the next financial year starts, we've got that pipeline of ECD programs that can benefit from the subsidy. So in our conversations with National Treasury, we've developed a strategy, a funding strategy with them, to say over the next 10 years, we need to progressively increase access to the subsidy, ensuring that all ECD programs that are supporting vulnerable children can access the subsidy, but we also need to progressively increase the value of the subsidy. And as I mentioned, in relation to the strategy, we received that 10 billion over the 2025-26 medium-term expenditure framework. And next year, we'll submit another budget to National Treasury in line with this strategy to ensure that every year we increase the funding to ECD programs, but we do it responsibly in a way that we can spend the funding, knowing that the current legislation means that an ECD program have to be registered before we can subsidize them. But with that, we are trying to include a current innovation. So something we're busy testing in some provinces, something we call compliance support, where we will be providing a once-off cash transfer to ECD programs to enable them to meet their compliance norms and standards. So there's certain provinces that's come on board and say they're willing to test this and pilot this, and from that we will be rolling it out nationally as well. So I think the question was, how would this bill change the reality, especially for informal, rural and community-based ECD programs? And it's again by firstly the legislation articulating that there's various different modalities. You get community-based centres, you get various different modalities, and then setting norms and standards that's contextually relevant to these different modalities. That will be, I think, the critical or the strategic piece in enabling us to really have diverse solutions for various different communities so that children can receive the services that are appropriate for the needs of the communities in which they're in. There was also a question on local government and just how do we work with local government and how do we ensure they don't become a bottleneck. But the reality is that they are currently a bottleneck already. And through this local government campaign we did earlier this year, the whole intention was to say, how do we start making stronger collaboration or foster stronger collaboration between our social workers at the ground level with the environmental health practitioners, with their local government, and how do we ensure that local government also understands the essence of Banapile, so that putting children first is in what they do. So I think we've been working systematically on breaking those relationships or building those relationships, breaking down the barriers. And what this bill will enable us to do again is say, let's draft a standard draft bylaw and let's have a standardized approach across local government, respecting that local government is an independent sphere of government, but encouraging them to say we really want to ensure that there's a standardized approach to early childhood development. And I think that is the whole. I think a lot of all of these mechanisms that we'll be doing is addressing that red tape. Is that how do we have norms and standards that's contextually relevant? How do we ensure that local government has a standardized approach to ECD programs? How do we have one streamlined registration process? And all of these will collectively help us break down a lot of the red tape that we're facing. I think there was also a question on how government can provide support to small early learning programs. So while the legislation is our long run solution to bringing a lot of reprieve, we know there's the 2026 and 27 financial year where we want to get as many ECD programs compliant with the norms and standards. And we've got multiple support channels in place at this point. We've got, for instance, the maintenance component of the ECD conditional grant that's supporting with maintenance upgrade and ensuring that ECD program meet their norms and standards. We've got this compliance support pilot that we're doing on saying how can we do a cash transfer to ECD programs to enable them to invest in those norms and standards that they need to still meet. We've got various communication channels in place on just providing correct information on what is expected to get registered. How do ECD programs comply with the right documentation that's needed? And then we're busy with what we call an early learning program initiative, where we're partnering with NGOs and various partners in the sector to say, how can we incentivize and support NGOs to go reach the most vulnerable areas and really hold the hand of an ECD practitioner that's struggling with the registration process, helping her to fill out the documents, helping her to understand what's exactly needed of her. And that initiative will also be launching very soon. I think as Ms. Gay also mentioned, I want to just clarify that there's 2 children amendment bills currently in process. And this stems from the history. So before the function shift, there was 1 children's amendment bill. The Portfolio Committee of Social Development at that point made the decision that the ECD component of that bill needs to be split out and become its own bill because of the function shift. And the bill we are speaking about in basic education relates only to the early childhood development sections. So it's chapter 6 mainly that we're focusing on. But because the bill was split, there's still a second bill that social development is responsible for. So matters relating to the National Child Protection Register, the protection of information for children, that is still with the Social Development's Children's Amendment Bill. So we need to, I think it will just be important to clarify that there are 2 bills, and ours focus specifically on ECD, given our minister and our MEC's competence and responsibility as per the presidential proclamation. But that being said, in our registration process, one of our key requirements is that all staff members and any adult on the premise of an early childhood development center needs to be checked against the National Child Protection Register. So anyone that's registered at the bronze, silver, or gold level, all their staff have already been checked against the National Child Protection Register. And just the final question on the funding challenge is we recognize that the value of the subsidy at this point is not where it should be. We're estimating that it should be closer to 48 Rand per child per day. So we're at 24 Rand per child per day. And we know it's not reaching all eligible children. And that is that financial strategy or modeling exercise we've done with National Treasury to say, how can we ensure that each year we responsibly increase the value of the subsidy and we increase reach of the subsidy to get to the point where we need to be. And our annual budget at this point is about 6 billion. And if we had to implement this mixed modality model as we are proposing and as we're proposing in the bill, being able to fund it at the more appropriate level, as well as ensuring that all children can benefit, will cost our country about 30 billion annually. So we need to progressively realize that and work with National Treasury to get to that point over the next 10 years. Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Honourable Chairperson. I think I hope I've covered all the technical questions.
Thank you, Dr. Kotze. Chair, over back to you.
Thank you very much, Minister and the team, for those responses. Honorable members, those are the responses of the department. I want to check if there's any follow-up. If there are questions, honorable members, that members believe they were not adequately responded to, I would propose that members do submit those written questions to Mr. Brown so that we can submit them to the department for written responses. But from where I'm seated, I think there has been a comprehensive response to the questions that we had raised.
I will submit mine in writing, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Honorable Mkize, for that indication. So with that said, honorable members, this was the only item on our agenda. You would have realized that in terms of our program, we were supposed to also deal with the BELA Act regulations today. However, there was a request from the department to give them a bit of time, but also to clarify comprehensively what we want them to capture or to cover in the presentation that we are requesting. So as a result, we've accepted that request, and we are going to be allocating a special day just to focus on the BELA regulations and the comprehensive step-by-step presentation in terms of its implementation in provinces. So with that said, honorable members, thank you very much for your time, for the participation in the meeting, and thank you to the minister and the team for the presentation. I do want to say to the members that I believe that this term we've really kind of focused on very important issues that perhaps as we engage as a smaller team, we might need to develop some form of a framework on how do we then track progress in these issues that we've discussed in this term, because I do believe that there are focus areas that really characterize the schooling environment and the schooling system. And if the issues that we have recommended, the issues that we've highlighted, if they are to be looked at, implemented, and if there could be plans or incorporated in the annual performance plans of the department, I think definitely we would be getting somewhere. So I just want to leave it at this. Honorable Mkize, I see you've got your hand up.
No, Chair, I actually omitted a very important thing I wanted to say thank you and salute to our researchers and analysts. They're quite spot on, and one can see the effort put behind the analysis. I would normally do my own analysis and compare with theirs. They are always 95% consistent. Almost, it shows that actually, yeah, they are really having their finger on the pulse. Thank you, researchers and analysts.
Okay. Thank you for that, Honorable Mkize, Mr. Kekana, and Ms. Mbude. I think that is to yourselves. The committee members are appreciating the work you're doing. And of course, it is very substantive work, and we appreciate it indeed. Honorable members, with that said, let's hope that you have a good weekend and a good constituency period. We will then, the meeting is adjourned. We will share, Mr. Brown, the next term's program when immediately we receive the focus areas from the Office of the House Chair, and then we will then accord members an opportunity to make submissions on what we should add. But all in all, thank you very much, honorable members, and have a great constituency period.
Siyabulela, Chair. Thank you.
Long live the Chair.
Thank you, Chair.